Hey! Step back. Tristan here. That's me. Welcome to Step Back Tonight. Much more demure, much more relaxed version than last week where we had, Hell World 2018 and all of its horrible glory. I don't see anybody in the chat yet, but the night is still young. Should probably go and open up my little analytics thing so I can make sure I can see who's, how well I'm doing. All right, there's already some people in here. Sweet. So, let's see. Oh, geez. Questions already. I swear, I have a theory that 255 AD, because I think that 255 AD asks questions of me in the Discord about one every 90 minutes, and then also asks about 400,000 questions during my streams. It makes me theorize that he has a text file that he just, whenever he thinks of a question for me, he saves them and he gets ready for whenever he thinks the opportunity is right. That's my theory. Anyways, welcome to Step Back Tonight, episode, is it episode 8 or something now? This is a weekly Tuesday night show that I do where I hang out with you wonderful people and we do something together. Last week was the big election, and that's over now. And this week we're going to kind of go back into something that I picked up and I'm going to continue doing, which is we're going to watch some of my old videos. But I'll take some questions first and see what's up. Tonight I also have this. This is Coke Zero and vodka, because that's all I had. So I'm going to get myself a bit of a buzz. And Kelly is out tonight. She's at a dinner for her her friend's birthday, so that's the thing. And some whole bunch of stuff happening in my life these days. If you guys noticed, I redecorated the back here, so you can see there's squares that are full of all my buttons. So you got my Bernie Sanders action figure and all sorts of fun stuff. And let's see. I finally framed, actually I had this framed before, but now I have a framed version of a newspaper article written about Step Back. That's now available. That's now all going to be my background. And there's a lot of white space. I'm going to be, when I'm shooting my videos, I'm going to be changing the angle a little bit from this, but there's a lot of white areas that I would really love to fill with, like, Step Back memes and funny things, and so if people can send them to me, I'll print some off and I'll put them in the background, including this amazing, very memeable surfboard that has my name on it. That's what that thing says, that my parents got when they went to Mexico just last week. So, yes, please contribute to the white genocide of my wall. And if anybody wants to know anything about what's going on, just let me know. Also, another thing is that looks like I might be getting some extra hours at my job, which means that more money, which is nice. I'll be able to use for something. Okay, let's take a look at what we got. A couple things here. So, why do Leninists say imperialism is a consequence of capitalism when forms of imperialism have existed for thousands of years before capitalism was a thing? Well, let's see here. I think that maybe Leninists are wrong. I feel like that is what we like to call a reductionist view of history, which is what MLs tend to do egregiously. It's why they tend to be wrong about a lot of things. So, yeah. But yeah, like capitalism as we know it today really didn't become a thing until about the like late 18th century. So yeah, like the idea that there's been imperialism forever, and so that's never really been a I don't agree with the Marxist Leninists on that one. It's too capitalism is like, hey David, the thing about ancient Rome and such is that you still have to look at like the way that their economy functioned at the time. And in Rome, even though there was a quote unquote merchant class, there wasn't enough of one because we didn't get to a point of technological progress that that we could dedicate enough of the percentage of the population to not farming. And that's really the thing that is the difference between like a pre-modern and a sort of capitalist economy, is that a capitalist economy has a significant number of workers on wages, while, in the past, especially in Rome, for example, Rome practiced slavery, and the vast majority of people at the time were subsistence farmers or just farmers in general. So it was still a period in which having land that you can farm on that produces goods in a relatively linear fashion was still the way to become powerful. That's why, if you think about the Middle Ages and you think about power in that period, while like capital is powerful in a capitalist society, having lots of land is important in a primarily agricultural society, which means that if you are the ruler of land, you have power. That's why, in that period, there were lots of the people who were the most powerful were the ones who were entitled to the most land. And wars were fought more over land and less over, strategic resources and things like that. And so, like, it changes things. Another thing I think I can now say publicly too, David, I know since you're in here, but if there's anybody else who's in Toronto, you should probably know, is that we're doing a third fan meetup. This is going to be on December 8th, and it's going to be, I think it's still going to be at the same place at Disgraceland. It's going to be at 7 or 8 o'clock. Keep watching the channel to see when that comes up, but there's going to be another meetup, same place as we usually do. It's going to be all the same folks. It's going to be Mexi and Thought Slime, and it's going to be a whole thing. We're going to do one more before we go. And then, if there's anybody who's watching who's in... I believe it is 19 plus. I'm very sorry. The other thing is that Chicago... if anybody lives in Chicago, we're working on a sort of holiday time meetup in Chicago between myself and Peter Coffin. So the two of us are slowly working at organizing a fan meetup in Chicago. So if you are around Chi-Town, keep updated with either myself or Peter Coffin's Twitter, or watch the YouTubes to see if you can come to the meetup in Chicago. We might, if it gets a good turnout, we might make it a yearly thing, because I actually spend all of my Christmases in Chicago, so it's a good thing we can organize. Alsdare Church says that you're now London based. I used to live in London. I moved to Toronto from London. Did Peter Coffin ever make a public statement about the whole fake girlfriend thing? Yes, he has. I'm not going to comment too much on it, but basically that it was a made-up story in order to, or it was, he basically got, like, catfished by ne'er-do-wells. And I imagine it was very embarrassing for him. But he says, like, yeah, it really sucked. And Gawker kind of sucks for drawing so much attention to it. But that's, you know, that's the past. Water under the bridge, etc., etc. All right. What happened? Had to reload YouTube. Oh, we were just talking about that weird Peter Coffin thing. It was some... He got catfished, like, years ago. And it has unfortunately dogged him ever since. And actually, one of the worst things is that it has so destroyed, like, anybody who searches him on Google finds out about this stuff. And so one of the things that's basically resulted in is that, like, he can't... He's basically unhireable. Like, he can only really do, like, random freelance jobs. It's really sad. Gawker basically ruined his life. Like, that site was shit, and I'm so glad that doesn't exist anymore. All right. Big Seltzer. But yeah, Peter Coffin and I are going to have a fan meetup in Chicago. You guys should go. I'll have more details probably as we get closer to December. He put up a Twitter poll, so if you want to look in like Peter Coffin's Twitter posts, you can vote. We're trying to figure out whether to do it like a few days before Christmas Eve. Like, we're thinking of like doing it like on the 22nd or the 23rd. Or whether we should do it like the 28th or the 29th or something like that. That's what we're trying to figure out which side of the holidays to do, you know. Okay. Big Seltzer. I was thinking, imagine if the U.S. abolished the Senate and replaced it with another house with proportional representation. Well, Big Seltzer, I feel like one of the things like, well, that would be a great idea. Why would you even need a second house? Like, in my mind, why don't you just get rid of the Senate and make the House and have it be proportional representational? I don't really think you need the bicameral system if you're going to just do it like that. Otherwise, it's just going to be like the House of Representatives and the House of slightly less representatives. But unfortunately, you're going to have to do... I mean, it'd be nice... That would probably be way better for the United States in the long term. Just that it could be chaotic. Yeah, unicameral. Like Canada should be. There's things about that might be difficult. Like the fact that if the government could change fairly often. Like the United States... If you were to move to a unicameral system, then think about basically the way that you would have to think about it for you guys in the U.S. is like there's like a thing of like the Speaker of the House, whoever would be Speaker of the House, would end up being the president or have the role internationally of the president. Which is basically how, you know, Canada and the UK work. And so the United States, can you imagine, because the thing that the US does with the House that's a little strange is that they have elections every other year, which would mean that, like, you could have a new American prime minister, like, every 24 months, which... You know, like, I get it. Like, that would be more democratic. It would also be really chaotic. Like, one of the things about Canada has 4-year elections unless we have minority governments in which things change. But the thing is that we don't have a unicameral government, but we do have... the Senate is not very strong. And so Canada, like, one of the weaknesses of our political system... of many, but one of the, you know, big ones is that we have a lot of people where we have a lot of like laws and policies and things like that get changed every time the government changes. Like every time it goes from liberal to conservative or back, a whole bunch of laws, big sweeping legislation will basically overturn all sorts of stuff. which means that, like, for example, like when my wife was applying for permanent residency, for example, when she was getting ready to immigrate to Canada, nobody could tell her what the process was because it keeps changing. And in Canada, like, if we, depending upon, you know, situations, because, like, we can have governments for over a decade. Like, I think, like, the longest term that prime ministers have served for is about 13 years, 14 years. And after that, they get, like, you know, they'll either replace leaders or they, like, you know, however long the Liberals rule for, then they will collapse, and then the Conservatives will take over, and the Conservatives will undo everything they did over the last 12 years. So it does mean that like, the thing about America that makes it very different from Canada as far as, like, legislation and stuff goes is that it's really slow. Like, to get legislation passed in America is very slow. But once it gets passed, and if it stands up to, like, Supreme Court challenges and stuff, those laws are also much harder to remove. Now that makes America very slow to change, and it makes things it makes the nature of injustice take a very long time to handle. But I do think that there is a kind of going too far in the other direction where maybe a country is changing all of its rules too often, and nobody knows what the rules are. Really depends. Honestly, if I think that if America wanted to change up their system to be more democratic, it would just be to take away so much of the power of the Senate. Like in Canada, our Senate is not elected; it's appointed by the Prime Minister, and they serve basically for life. But the Senate is mostly made up of former politicians who are sort of elder statesmen and things like that. And there's a lot of them. And the thing is, though, is that they really can't do much. They don't make Senate versions of bills. What they do is they get whatever the House of Commons puts out, and they can either approve it, which they most of the time do, or they send it back for revisions. And if they send it back for revisions, usually they have specifically the things they want to change. But the Senate is more like the way that the Canadian, like a Canadian civics class would teach you, is that they're called the, quote, sober second thought. And they're sort of old politicians. Almost all of them, like, you know, all of them are liberal or conservative, but, like, there's a mix because basically Senate seats get appointed whenever a person in the Senate retires or dies, or in a pretty recent case winds up being a sex criminal. And then they just get replaced with another appointee. And most people don't even know they're senators. Like, I have never voted for a senator in my life. And I don't really have a quote-unquote senator. Like, I don't have, like, a senator for Ontario. I mean, like, the senators aren't necessarily, like, for each province and things like that. Although there's, like, some, like, rules where, like, more than, like, a handful of them need to be from Quebec, for example. So it's less democratic, but they're also way less impactful. They're not as important. So because basically they're just like the second round of edits on a... they're the institutional memory, I think, is what they're supposed to be the function of, that exist in our parliamentary system. But this has been a thing that's been up for debate. The thing is that, like, one of the long-term debates in Canadian politics right now is what to do with the Senate. All three major political parties have different ideas for how the Senate should function. The Liberals think that the Senate should stay the way it is, mostly because there are more liberal senators than any other party. Conservatives want an elected Senate. And the NDP, which is like the Socialist Party, wants to abolish the Senate. and I am more in the abolish the Senate camp. I don't think that the Senate, having an undemocratic organ of government, is an undemocratic organ of government that really all it ever does is function to stem progress, is a smart idea. I also believe in abolishing all government. That is true. But I do think that getting rid of the Senate would be a net benefit for the country. Yeah. Yeah, okay, yeah. The NDP ranges from almost socialist to somewhat social democrat. But they're becoming more left-wing, and also millennials in the NDP are way more socialist. Like, Jagmeet Singh is way more left-wing than, like, Tom Mulcair was. And I would even say that Tom Mulcair was more left-wing than, say, Jack Layton was. So, like, they used to be more socialist, then they got less socialist, and now they're getting more socialist. They kind of go back and forth. He is a social democrat, but Jagmeet Singh, like, he's a lot more left-wing than, like, the NDP leadership was when he took it, I guess I should say. So he's pushing the NDP left. Not as far left as I'd like. I was a member of the NDP, and I actually backed Nikki Ashton for leader of the party. She would have been awesome, but, you know, I'm not unhappy with Jagmeet Singh is what I'm saying. I think that Jagmeet Singh will be able to get the NDP into the same type of politics that, like, say, Justin Trudeau does, where, like, it's all about personality and sizzle and no steak. But Jagmeet Singh is sizzle with a bit of steak. So I prefer a bit of steak to no steak. Or if you're a vegan, it can be veggie steak or whatever, you know. Canadian politics is weird. I talk about it way too much on this stream for my, like, what, 48% American audience? Is Singh the Sikh guy? Yes, yeah, Jagmeet Singh is the first, I think he is the first non-white leader of a major political party in Canada, and he is the first Sikh to be the leader of a political party as well. But it makes sense because in Canada, Sikhs are very... there are a lot more Sikhs as a minority group in Canada than, say, the United States. We have a lot more immigrants in Canada who are from Pakistan and India, and Sikhs come from both of those countries, so it's not surprising. And we have a lot. I grew up with a lot of Sikhs. Anybody who's from the sort of Punjab region, there's a lot of Sikhs that are from there. But I can definitely talk more about Canadian politics as things get interesting. We're going to go into a federal election next year, which will get interesting. We'll end up, it will happen about next October, so I'm sure I'll be talking about it all along because, you know, it's my job now to do it for you guys. Yeah. And I also can't be political at work. Or we can't be partisan at work. So I can't really talk about this stuff and, like, the stuff that I do for work. Yeah. But yeah, Empire, yeah, because Empire, but also because, you know, that's immigration. Like, a lot of people have immigrated from multiple countries that were part of the British Empire, but, you know, once an immigrant community gets, like, founded, they then bring over more people from that community to live in that community, and it grows and it does more things, and so it gets into, like, it grows. It's self-perpetuating. And yeah, we have a lot of immigrants from India, a lot of immigrants from Pakistan. We have a lot of immigrants from the Middle East and a lot of immigrants from China. It's just like, you know, just like how America's got a lot of immigrants from, like, the Philippines and a lot of immigrants from Mexico and a lot of immigrants from, also from India. Not, like, as much by percentage, but, you know, same thing. Okay. And I wrote down everyone's questions, so I will get to them. Don't worry. So, don't worry. Oh my, I see a super chat. Alan CB, I prefer the NDP be center. This way, we have a spectrum of parties in this party. Wait, what? Like, but okay. I'm kind of confused. You want the NDP to be centrist when we already have a centrist party. Like, if you want the NDP to be centrist, why don't you just be a liberal? Like, isn't that what the liberals are for? The other thing, too, this is something that Americans don't get, and sometimes the NDP doesn't get, is that when you have more than 2 political parties in a parliament, you don't always have to win elections in order to be able to be influential. Like, if you want... liberalist, leftist, NDP, centrist, conservatives, right? That is very strange. I would never want the NDP to be to the right of the liberals. That's how the NDP always loses. Like, Justin Trudeau basically like veered to the left of the NDP and they won. I think that I would think that the other way around is more accurate, I think, but okay. Maybe I should get to the next question. Yeah, I would put the liberals as center right. They're very good at campaigning like they're left wing, but they basically only do right wing actions. So I don't know. But thank you very much, Alan. I really appreciate the super chat. I really do. It's the kind of thing that makes this that makes me keep doing this sustainable. I really like doing this for you guys, and things like super chats help me keep it going. Especially because I'm going to be taking on more hours at work, so I can justify it, you know. Okay. Okay, so let's see where we go. A fellow Forest City. Yeah, I have lived in London, or I lived in London basically from 2013 to 2017. I did, I went there to do grad school. I did my 2 MAs and the first 2 years of my PhD at Western. So, yay, go Mustangs, I think. Green Element, who has been very patient. Thoughts on Howard Zinn? I love Howard Zinn. I have read from People's History of the United States to my American history class almost every year that I taught. I taught American history for 3 years? Is that right? Did I teach three years? Jeez, okay. And I used to read People's History of the United States stuff from there. Where in London? I used to live in an apartment at the corner of Oxford and Richmond. And then I moved on campus after that. But yeah, where was I? Oh yes, we were talking about Howard Zinn. I do think that Howard Zinn is good. I think that he's not with us anymore. That he was a little bit, I would say, reductionist, class reductionist. I think that he has a lot of issues when it came to representations of women in history. I think that he kind of dropped the ball when it came to women in a lot of his writings. But still, he took a history that was very dominated by one mindset and tried to break that. And I think that was a good idea. That's kind of what Step Back is trying to do. That's why, like, sometimes I call myself the Howard Zinn of the YouTube history channels. Good old vodka. Yes, very much London, Ontario. All right. The apparent timescales make it seem that if climate change is to be addressed, it must be done while capitalism is still dominant. Do you think that's possible? Oh, geez. I think it might be. It might be very, very difficult. I don't think that capitalism is going to buy its own energy. Like, I don't really believe that, like, things like cap and trade are going to, like, make the market incentivize being good to the environment. I really think that we are going to need we are going to have to get off of our carbon-based economy sooner than we can get rid of capitalism, which makes me think that you're going to need the state to actively get in and mess around with the way that we produce energy. And there's really not any other way to do it. Don't be such a grumpy quack. I think French is a great language and everyone should learn it. It's useful. If you want to learn French, French people already learn English in Canada, and if you want to learn French in Canada as an English speaker, if you want to work in the federal government, you basically need to. So it pays to know French in Canada. And I think someone just got home.
I forgot tonight was Tuesday.
Yeah.
Hi, I was like, who are we having an impromptu stream with?
No one yet. No, all these people.
Hi, all. Are you doing a review of your old videos?
I'm going to. I'm kind of still doing the opening questions and stuff.
Cool. Oh, did we get Diet Root Beer?
No, this is Coke Zero and vodka.
What? Why?
Because I thought if I drank the rum, you'd get mad at me.
Yeah, I would.
Even the rum Barcello.
I'm sorry, what?
The rum Barcello. The rum from Mexico.
Cool.
But that, like, big bottle of vodka that we all hate,
yeah,
that I thought you'd be fine with me.
Okay, yeah, you can drink that.
All right. Do you have an issue with me having a document full of pre-written questions? No, I guess not. That was my suspicion, is that because you usually have questions that are like posted like before the stream even starts, and so I was just like, you have a lot of them. I worry that you might give my opinion too much weight. I feel like I think that the things I have to say are not that valuable. Now I can't get shit-faced. But oh well. Radical Reviewer. What if the U.S. Fed restructured to be like the EU, where states act as countries? That could be fun. I think that happens to some extent, but you would definitely end up with some really, really shitty... like, the South is already really shitty, and I imagine that, like, if all of the states sort of acted as their own countries, but with, like, a unified currency and stuff like that, and, like, a common movement zone or whatever you want to say, I would say that, it's useful, or that it would result in some states, especially rural states, would be not so well off economically, unless you had like some severe equalization payments. Why not a global government which runs like the US or Canada? That'd be fun too. Yeah. Would that be going back to the Articles of Confederation? No, I think that the European Union's a little bit more integrated than the Articles of Confederation. But yeah, you would see some states get a lot worse. You'd also see some states get a lot better. Like California would probably be a way better state to live in than it is now. You'd probably also, maybe not that much better, but I would like to see what like Oregon and Washington and Vermont would end up being like if they were more independent. But it's interesting thought, but I do think that there's a lot of people who would get really screwed over, and the way that America shakes out, it'd be a lot of black people, which is not good. Okay. All right. Does party... Okay, this is from DQuack. How does party leadership work? I think it's bad, since I think the leader of Canada should be chosen in primaries every election. I hope that was sarcastic. But basically, every political party in the country has its own style of leadership race. And leaders basically lead until they are either voted out of the party by the party mechanisms. Like, say for example, very recently the NDP had a gathering in which Thomas Mulcair, who lost the election in 2015, was booted out as leader of the party by popular vote, and then they had to have another leadership race, which took place over the next year or so. And all the parties have their own sort of leadership. It's very internal. It's not like primaries. It's not like caucuses or anything like that. It's very much a vote that's done by people who are in the party. And in the case of the Conservatives, you even have to the Conservatives. They have debates and stuff too in the primaries, but they had like Conservatives. You have to be very much an insider to be able to vote for leadership, and you really got to you only right-winger academic I get to question regularly. Well, all right. I guess I can take that role. Yeah. So each of the three parties that I know of have every party has their own way of doing things. For example, the NDP has instant runoff voting, and it almost would have happened. So I'd actually felt when I was in the NDP leadership race, I had to vote a ranked ballot, and unfortunately, Jagmeet Singh won in the first round. But that also means that things could happen, although I don't think it's happened in recent memory, that a party can replace their leader entirely internally, which would result in a new prime minister. This didn't exactly happen, I guess this is how it happened. In 1992, 1993, when the Conservatives knew that they were going to lose the next election really hard, and so Brian Mulroney basically got Kim Campbell to take his place, and she ran the election against Jean Chrétien, and the Progressive Conservatives lost hard in that election. But it's a thing that can happen. You could just have a new prime minister that nobody voted for, which happens. Okay. What do you do for work? I do communications for a civil liberties non-profit organization. Possibly external communications, depending upon how the next few days go. All right. Would you recommend moving to Canada? I'm from Brazil, an engineer, and been thinking about moving abroad. I mean, you could do worse. You could probably do better, but you could do worse. Canada's a fun place. Very, very multicultural. Lots of different people from all over the world who live here. I would recommend moving to one of the big cities. I'd recommend moving to Toronto or Montreal, to be honest. That's my recommendation. But there's a lot of pretty stuff to see here. And I imagine that without like Bolsonaro, like with him freaking bearing down on you, I imagine getting out would be a very good idea right now. Okay. Okay, I'm not saying it's awful. It's an awful language. I'm saying for Western Canada, it's useless since more have luck finding a German speaker than a French, and only people from Quebec and Ontario can run. Well, there are French speakers out west too. There are the Métis people. There are. I know it's not a big thing, but it is part of the kind of country's heritage and the sort of national identity and weird stuff like that. But French as a language is a thing that is federally recognized, and so speaking French does pay dividends if you want to work in the federal government. Yeah, and French, like, I mean, Canada was a French colony before it was a British one. Now, it belonged to, like, the Iroquois and the Algonquin and the Blackfoot and, like, the many, many other nations that lived in this area before that, but the Mississauga and everything. But still, I don't know that I would. There's a lot of languages, and I don't know. I just French is a good language. It's also French is a useful language for the long term because there is a pretty strong position to say that French is going to become the next lingua franca after English because of population explosions that are expected to happen in West Africa. And so by 2200, French might be the most widely spoken language on Earth. So it's a useful language to have in your back pocket. Not to mention, as an English speaker, if English is your first language, French is one of the easiest second languages you to get. It's very similar. English has borrowed a lot from French over the years, mostly because Britain used to be ruled by French rulers for a long time. So, you know, it's not a bad language. Oh, yeah, okay, so Manitoba has... Okay, so yeah, they speak more German in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC. The thing is, the population of Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC is less than the population of Ontario and Quebec and and New Brunswick, which have lots of French. So, like, it's just like, yeah, I guess, and if you want to, like, say that less people speak French in these, like, big, wide, empty areas that have, like, you know, a province that is like the size of like 3 U.S. states and has a population smaller than like 1 million people, then yeah, go for it, I guess. But like, learning German anywhere is not going to be a very valuable skill, unless you want to go to Germany. Because like, yeah, German is not really a... If anything, if there's any language you should pick up, it's Mandarin. If it's not French, because of how much. If you want to go with the West, because of like how many Mandarin speakers there are in British Columbia. But I would say that learning French is easier than learning Mandarin. You speak Spanish. Good stuff. I know a little bit of Spanish, but not enough. All right, Tim Masters. Of all the states in this scenario, which would be 1870s Germany? Oh, is this from the time we were talking about each state being independent? 1870s Germany. Oh, like the one that would like eat up all the other states? That would have to be either New York or California, right? They're the only states, I think, that would have the independent resources in order to eat up a bunch of other states. Not to mention, if you want to learn like Quebec French, it's a lot of English borrow words and like the words hostie and tabarnak, and like you're good. You'll get by. What is the best voting system you know of? Oh, geez. That's a toughie. Sortarian, I like a lot. Well, it's not really a voting system. That's more like democracy without a voting system. Sortition system or something like that, which is that, you know, it's the voting where you just like vote, like instead of voting you just get like random people given positions of representation, like it's just done by like random draw. The idea of like popular sovereignty, like, you know, just like ruling by referendum, I think is probably the best voting system. And maybe having even a like deferrable vote. This would be a lot more complicated, but like you could vote on any bill you want, but if you don't want to bother having an opinion about that, you could entrust your vote with somebody else, in which you could give it to them and they would vote with your vote. Unless you cared about a specific issue, then you could take your vote back for that vote, etc., etc. In that way, you can have your votes taken away at any time. Things like that. Let's see. Would you quit your job if the CCLA wanted you to make a video with content you're ethically opposed to giving voice to? Well, my name isn't on it, so not necessarily, but also it would be a very weird situation in which the CCLA had a position that I disagreed with so much that I would consider quitting my job over it. Judging how much I love civil liberties and don't like oppression, and we tend to not get involved with like hate speech and stuff like that, so it's like, I don't think that I can't think of a situation in which that would happen. Not to mention it would like ruin my life, which, like, you know, not the best thing. Okay. So should we watch? So last time we watched my old videos, we got to the end of 2015. But now, we're going to get to 2016 videos. So that's going to be exciting. I know you guys are pumped to see that happen. Because, this 2016 is the year that my channel really took off, and I became not just like a random YouTuber, but like, you know, had like a bit of an audience. So let me just get my setup there. Okay. Alrighty. Let's do this. We're gonna watch. This is my video from my first video in 2016, and this was a video in which this was the video I had been sitting on for a long time, in which I wanted to sort of build this video about people who had, even though they might not have been the most competent people in the world, you might not have heard of them, but they had some of the like biggest impacts on American, or on the world, with very small work. Where's my wife? She is in the living room. I think she actually is watching the stream. I think she's typing in to say something to you right now. But yeah, so this is my old video. This is 5 people who changed the world.
Yeah, I'm right here.
Here at Step Back, we've been focusing on historical events. Hello, Internet. Here at Step Back, we've been focusing on historical events that do not lean on singular, important people to understand. Often, historians tend to overemphasize the roles of individuals in the overall course of humanity. But hell, I think it's time we shook things up a bit. I decided to put together a list of 5 people you might have never heard of, but had a huge impact on our history. Simply going from oldest to youngest.
This is a video introduction that I bought off Fiverr. Oh my god. It so doesn't fit the channel at all. And I fixed the volume.
Number 1, Cyrus the Great. Those of you who study the deep past or the Bible might already know this chap, but he was the emperor over the largest empire in history. This Achaemenid empire spanned from Bulgaria to the Indus River. But it was one simple act of mercy, not his conquests, that made Cyrus so interesting. The Jews in the book of Isaiah loved Cyrus, making him the only non-Jew referred to as Messiah. What would Cyrus do to get the Jews to love him so? Cyrus formed his massive, diverse empire on religious tolerance, and under him the Jews, living in exile at the time, were allowed to return to Judea. This quickly followed with the construction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem and a restoration of the influence of Judaism in the region. This is the 6th century BCE, so Jesus would be over 500 years away, and Muhammad over 1,000. Without this migration back to Jerusalem...
I forgot, just a second, just go back there for a second.
...of Judaism in the region. This is the 6th century BCE, so Jesus...
I intentionally went for a long time looking for a black Jesus for this picture because I thought it would make people mad, but literally nobody noticed.
This would be over 500 years away, and Muhammad over 1,000. Without this migration back to Jerusalem, we would likely have seen the Jews fade out like so many Middle Eastern religions of the time, and the Abrahamic faiths would cease to exist. Imagining a world without Judaism, Christianity, or Islam is extremely difficult, just showing how an act of tolerance can be more significant than a million conquests. Number 2, Fritz Haber. Fritz Haber was a Jewish scientist in Germany at the end of the 19th and early 20th century. He has a complicated legacy. His most famous invention is the Haber-Bosch process, which is possibly the biggest innovation in farming technology. He's also known for one of the deadliest weapons of war ever used. Our atmosphere is made mostly of nitrogen, and it has a good amount of hydrogen in it to boot. Haber figured out how to take these two gases and make ammonia. Ammonia is a key component in the creation of artificial fertilizers. Before this, farmers used things like guano, and countries literally...
I've always wanted to make a video about the Guano Islands, like as a video concept idea, but like then I think like every YouTube channel ever has made a video about Guano Islands, and so I don't really know what I would do that would be unique about it. So there we go.
We went to war over islands covered in bird poop. With this process, we can make fertilizer literally out of thin air, and he is why we have a planet that can feed 7 billion people right now. This process was not, however, without a dark side. Haber is also famously called the father of chemical warfare. He found a way to develop weaponized chlorine for gas attacks during the First World War. He was even personally present at the Second Battle of Ypres, where it made its dark debut. Feeding the world and chemical weapons show the extremes of scientific progress.
Damn. I'm surprised at this statement because like everyone's so like, you know, fuck yeah science that like nobody would ever like think to do this, you know, to get into this thing. Too soon you'll miss the Great War series. Oh man, I'm so glad I did not make a Armistice Day video. It just war is just not my thing.
Number 3, Thomas Midgley Jr. Just a heads up, there are a lot of scientists in this one. Thomas Midgley was an American chemist, known for 2 of the worst inventions for public health and the environment, tetraethyl lead and chlorofluorocarbons. One of Midgley's projects was to find a solution to engine locking. Regular gasoline could not produce enough pressure in an engine to make the pistons work just right. To increase engine performance and get more out of each ounce of fuel, Midgley invented tetraethyl lead. This additive would give gas...
Look at my wonderful art here. My, like, driving goggles and stuff like that. And happy Ford's Day. If there's, like, one person in the chat who can get that reference, who's not Kelly, because I know that Kelly will get it, I would be like, yeah. References. I used to make more of them.
Extra power it needed. Here's the problem. Burning leaded gasoline would dump tons of lead into the atmosphere. This would build up in people's bodies and lower their IQ and increase antisocial behavior. There's an actual measurable increase in IQ levels in countries as they stopped using leaded gasoline. How could he possibly have topped that? Well, his next project would be to create a new refrigerant. He put together a compound called chlorofluorocarbons, which on top of use as a refrigerant could act as a propellant in aerosol cans and as an industrial solvent. The nickname for this compound was CFCs, which some of you might be familiar with. CFCs in the atmosphere did one really impressive thing, which was corrode ozone. Our ozone layer in the atmosphere does small things like prevent the sun's rays from giving us skin cancer. The Montreal Protocol of
God, I used a thing for stripping the silence in this, and it is so bad. It's so bad. I can't even like watch these videos sometimes. But this was like one of my first this is one of my first like actual successful videos, which is so weird.
1989 banned these from use, but even today, nearly 30 years later, the ozone layer hasn't completely recovered. Nice work, Tom. Number 4, Norman Borlaug. I know.
Oh yeah, Norman Borlaug. Yeah.
A third scientist. These people tend to do amazing things and then get their names forgotten. You can probably name more theoretical physicists and mathematicians than agricultural scientists or chemists. Well, this biologist might make you just want to change your mind. Norman Borlaug has been called the father of the Green Revolution and is credited with saving 1 billion lives. After getting his PhD in plant pathology and genetics,
Oh yeah, people are talking about the clouds. So if you look, what it is it's the same cloud, just one's bigger. The bigger cloud is behind my head, and the smaller cloud is like in front of my head and kind of covers the front to make it look three-dimensional.
In 1942, Borlaug moved to Mexico.
You can't find anything on Ford's Day? It's a reference to the novel Brave New World.
To work on their food crisis going on at the time. Through his work, Mexico introduced high-yield, disease-resistant forms of wheat, as well as pushing for modern farming technique. After Mexico, he would go to replicate this again in Pakistan and India. This led to Mexico actually becoming a wheat exporter in 1963 and doubling yields in Pakistan and India. This revolution in food security is collectively called the Green Revolution.
Yeah, my facial hair is 2 clouds as well. But that one I've since gotten rid of. I've changed my art style since this video. And so yeah, it's not that new. But these videos, these ones here, are still made in, they're still made in PowerPoint.
And Borlaug received the Nobel Peace Prize for it, after which he went to Africa and Asia to make even more food possible. We are now discussing new ways to grow and distribute food that might be healthier but less efficient, whether it be farm-to-table, organic, or non-GMO crops. I think we need to remember the histories of huge food shortages when pursuing our legitimate desires for a healthier and better world. In the future, we expect more people to feed, not less. Number 5, Stanislav Petrov.
This one's sad because since I made this video, Stanislav Petrov has died.
Many of these people listed above are known for saving, feeding, or poisoning millions of people. But Stanislav Petrov might actually be the only person who literally saved the world. The year was 1983, and the Cold War was alive again after nearly a decade of détente. 3 weeks after the Soviet Union shot down a Korean Airlines flight, Petrov was working at a nuclear weapons early warning system. He saw what the Soviet Union had spent decades fearing and preparing for. 1 missile, then 2, then 7 were launching from the United States. Given the tense situation between the countries, Petrov had every reason to panic. However, he didn't. He kept his cool and reported it as a false alarm. The USSR credited Petrov with preventing a retaliatory strike and starting a nuclear war. The satellite system he was working on had indeed malfunctioned. The craziest thing about this guy is that he's still alive.
Did you wrote the script? Yes, I did wrote the script.
Hey, and I don't think I'm alone in saying Dyakuyu, Stanislav. I think the main lesson we can learn from this is that even though the world is big and there are a lot of people out there, it is possible for one person to make a difference. And even if our textbooks are lined with conquerors and kings, sometimes the chemist, the biologist, or even the duty officer in a massive bureaucracy can change the face of the world. What do you guys think? Is history made by great men, historical trends and forces, or random crap? Let me know down in the comments, and for more history videos, subscribe to Step Back.
Why is the audio so low? I don't know. It's at max volume. I also think that my videos used to just be quieter back then, which, you know, but I have everything at at max. There's really not much I can do at that point. I tried to see if there was like a way I could like amplify the audio of my thing, but I can't really figure it out unless like this does something. Oh, yes. Okay. Maybe I can add some gain. All right, let's see how this works. Thank you, Engel. All right. So that was the first video of 2016. That was, for what it was, you see, it's got 13,000 views to this day. But when it first came out, it was actually like one of my most successful videos, which is funny because now it's like on the lower half of my videos by views. So it just shows that like it was successful at a time, but if we, depending upon how far we get in this this watching series, there was one video that basically changed everything in the summer of 2016. So maybe we'll get to that. Now here, okay, this is my next video. Came out January 23rd of 2016, and to this day is the most popular. It's the second most popular video on Step Back. So, like, obviously, I peaked in January of 2016, friends.
Hello, Internet. What if I were to tell you there was a religion out there dedicated to the unity and equality of all humankind and social justice? What if I told you that their most holy site is also a soup kitchen? Does this sound like a religion you know? Today, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to tell you about the 5th most populous religion and their followers, the Sikhs.
So yeah, the Sikh video.
The Sikhs
Such
are
a-
one of the youngest religions
Such a
on
runaway
Earth,
success.
developing in the 15th century Punjab region of the Mughal Empire. Today, this would be in the region that straddles India and Pakistan. Sikhism
I need to do more
has
India.
over 25 million followers
I haven't done enough Indian
in not only
videos.
India and Pakistan, but nearly every country on Earth. So how did Sikhism start? The origins come from the religion's founder Guru Nanak. Since him, about 10 Sikh gurus have laid down foundations over the centuries, the last being Guru Gobind Singh, who established the
Isn't it
five
actually
holy
a short
scriptures of the
I?
faith.
Yes, it's actually like it's
These
pronounced like
scriptures,
sick,
collectively called the Guru
but I'm
Granth
very bad
Sahib,
at pronouncing things.
speak of a singular god, and Guru
And I grew up
Nanak as God's
saying
bard.
Sikh, and it's just like kind of stuck with
Under
me.
the Mughal Empire, the early Sikhs were pressured to convert to Islam. Several prominent gurus became martyrs at the hands of Mughal rulers.
Honestly, David, I think it's one of my most popular videos because there's really not a lot of videos about this religion on YouTube. And so I'm pretty sure that this video, first of all, this video was the proof of concept that like videos about religion and religious history do really well on my channel. But also, this video like ranks for the search for Sikhism, and so a lot of search traffic comes to this video.
It was this that inspired a movement within the religion called the Khalsa, a push for religious freedom. So what do the Sikhs believe? They have only one God, but not
Not to mention the music that I picked for it. Friggin' rules.
in the sense that Jews, Christians, and Muslims do. To the Sikhs, God is called the Ik Onkar, the one
What in
Brahman,
India should
or
you
the
do,
pervading
do you
spirit.
think?
They pray
I get
through
that joke.
Simran, or meditation over the words
Good
of the
job,
Guru
Grappling
Granth
Hooks.
Sahib. This can be quiet
Do Tamil
meditation
Nadu.
or singing
Hashtag
in a
do
ritual
Tamil
called
Nadu.
kirtan. They preach control over the 5 thieves.
Okay, this is the one. This is the funny one. I've gotten the whole do Tamil Nadu meme that was like popular like, I don't know, like 5 or 6 weeks ago. Oh, okay. Oh, we have a visitor. You gonna come up? Come on. Come on. Oh, now you're shy. Okay. So, I don't know why she doesn't want to jump up. Okay. So when I referred to the five sins or whatever in Sikhism, oh, there we go. Hey, girl. I'm sure the stream is very happy to see you. People hated so much that I added Trump as Like, the thing is, like, I remember, like, back in the days, I was still pretty, like, you know, pretty off, kept my hands off of the touchy stuff. And you'll see by the end of 2016, that changes 150%. Do a complete 180 on that. But when I mentioned that, like, Trump as an example of, like, I think, like, narcissism or something, like, people were like, oh man, like, I hated that your channel got political. Now I can't show people this video. And it's like, oh geez. And I also have Ayn Rand under greed. So, you know, all good.
Lust, rage, greed, attachment, and conceit.
Oh, conceit.
They also have unique emphasis on justice, stating that justice, restorative justice, or divine justice trump any other codes and morals. Their form of justice means that men and women are treated equally in Sikhism, and women have been able to conduct services since the beginning. They do not see a difference between the temporal world and the spiritual, meaning that devotion is a daily, lived activity. This includes, but is not limited.
Oh man, okay. I used to put so many more references in here. So let's see. Horoscopes, Box News, that's like from the first video. Friggin' the Ferengi reference here. And then Tinder Madison, which I think is like for... It's supposed to be like a joke about like infidelity, I think is like a reference in this slide.
To your normal religion's prohibitions on drinking, superstitions, idol worship, lying, gossiping, and adultery. But on top of those, they also can't cut their hair.
Oh man, yeah, I just made more hair until it covered me.
Consume alcohol or caffeine, go on pilgrimage, fast, circumcise their children, wear a veil, have a priesthood, or eat meat. They also have to wear a ceremonial dagger called a kirpan. There's a lot of rules.
So the kirpan thing is actually interesting because that comes up a lot in like religious expression issues in Canada because schools ban them from bringing knives to school, but they have to wear one on their person as like part of their religion, and it's a whole thing. They're now allowed to wear it to school.
Because they don't cut their hair, Sikh men often wear turbans. In fact, in North America,
did I put my
someone
Turban
wearing a
Outfitters
turban
picture
is
in
well
here?
over 90% likely to be a Sikh. They do often get confused with Muslims, and yes, it has led to some horrible discrimination and violence. On that note, of the 25.8 million Sikhs in the world, only 75% of them live in the Punjab. They have large communities all over the world, especially in my home country of Canada. This includes our new badass defense minister, Harjit Sajjan.
Oh man, this was still when like only like 4 or 5 months after Trudeau got elected, and I didn't hate him yet, and so I talked good things about Harjit Sajjan, which like I would not do today.
John. With their strong devotion to equality, obligatory dagger wielding, and origins in a region thought to be Muslim or Hindu, Sikhism is certainly a unique religion. This is why I decided to tell you about them. For a group of people that live in every corner of the world, they seem to be really unknown. Worse yet, they are often lumped into Islamophobic hate.
Yeah, there we go. They're often lumped to Islamophobic hate and an unrelated picture of Donald Trump. Like this is like early 2016s. This is still when like we could make jokes about Donald Trump. Like this is when he was still like a candidate. And so like we could still like it's funny. One of the things that like if you look back to like anything from 2015, 2016, like we used to make so many jokes about Trump, and then he got elected and everything just did not become funny anymore. And it's like now like I can like cringe at jokes that I made like 2 years ago just because of how dark things have gotten.
I guess the world is filled with cool stories, groups, and people.
Oh yeah, and yeah, I always have been like the whole like you were like this was good, this history was good until politics came in. Like I've always said that's full of shit. I've never believed these comments. They're just dumb comments. But this is the first time I think I started getting them. Why do you not like PM Trudeau? Well, let's see. How do I count the ways? Justin Trudeau has literally not followed up on nearly any of his actual campaign promises. He campaigned as a super progressive. He campaigned on doing major structural reforms to the country, things like changing our voting system so that it would be closer to proportional representation and be more democratic, and believing in climate change and standing up to the environments and all that kind of thing. And then he went on to be the biggest pipeline builder, basically kept almost every single one of Stephen Harper's, like, tough on crime, like, racist laws. Gave up on, like, basically, like, didn't even try to get voting reform at all. And sold himself as a feminist while selling weapons to Saudi Arabia. Yeah, and then he tried to say that it was a deal made under the conservatives and that he, like, you know, he had to follow through with his deal. But then we found out that it was actually made after the, like, thing. It was just, oh, God. He's such a liar. He basically showed that it's like the first election with the Liberals when I was an adult, and I basically had to learn my lesson that I think every Canadian learns, which is that the Liberals will literally never say the truth. They are pathological liars that will never, ever, ever, ever be trustworthy, and you can basically trust them to just do the hard right-wing neoliberal thing at all times. They're not socially conservative, which is nice, but they will always say the right thing and do the horrible thing. And there is literally no time you can ever trust a liberal because they just say whatever it is that they need to say to get elected, but they have no intention of following up on any of them. So whether it's Ontario or Canada in general or any province, I will literally never vote for a liberal. They're liars. They're pathological liars.
That we don't notice, even when they're very close to us. Did you learn something about Sikhism today? I always love hearing about people's experiences with my videos down in the comments section. Check out more Step Back videos, and of course, subscribe so you don't miss out on the next one.
Alright. So that's Sikhism. I haven't seen that video in a while. It was good to see that. It's pretty cool. It's all, yeah, I think it was my first religion video, and also that video did really well, and so I think I started doing more. Okay. The next video is pretty cool. This one is going to be funny because I imagine a lot of you guys are fans of quote-unquote The Exploration, and this is a collaboration we did for the Iowa caucus, like, forever ago. So this is going to be so weird years later, judging where the two of us have wound up ever since.
Since 1972, Iowa has been the first hurdle in the 100-meter dash to the White House. It has always traditionally been the place where the contenders begin to narrow. These caucuses have been getting crazier year after year, making the next one the possible craziest one yet. (1988), the end of the Reagan.
I should probably, yeah, everyone's talking about, like, at least they're not the conservatives. There is not that much difference between liberals and conservatives. It's mostly in branding. Like, there's a few things that are different from, like, going from, like, Kathleen Wynne to Doug Ford, especially when it comes to, like, social stuff. When it comes to, like, economic stuff and things like that, they're, like, basically the same. Like, in Ontario, Kathleen Wynne privatized electricity and, like, basically withheld all of, like, the funds that were needed for her big investment in mental health care and basically just further privatized and squeezed the blood out of the stone of the province as much as she could. So, like, it's functionally similar, just the branding is, like, the key difference between them.
Era. What made this particular primary crazy is that it brought out gigantic crowds. Everything was bigger in the 80s. The hair, the shoulder pads, and its religious right. Evangelical conservatives
Yeah. Scumbag Steve.
dominated the years leading.
That's how you know I'm really up to date with what the memes of the kids these days is. I'm still using Scumbag Steve jokes.
Up to 1988, and television preacher / professional troll Pat Robertson was making a go for the White House. Despite the evangelical lockdown, he finished second, with future President George Bush finishing third. In 2004, Howard Dean was king of the world, then screamed his way into third place. It's hard to think of it as history.
Oh man, remember when, like, Howard Dean going, yeah, was, like, a thing that could kill somebody's political career? Wow. things have changed.
But yes, Howard Dean lost his place as frontrunner because of a scream. The high placing of John Edwards and John Kerry propelled them to eventually face Bush later that year. In 2008, Hope and Change Fever officially began.
Your voice sounds different. It's deeper now. Yeah, I do. Well, since this video has come out, I've gotten a better microphone, and also I do a little bit of a pitch shift on my voice for the main Step Back videos. I pitch shift about like 2% down, but I don't think it's not like it's not like me getting older or anything like that. Like I was when this video came out, like January 2016, I was like 27, so I really highly doubt it was. If it was puberty, I was a very, very, very late bloomer.
In what was a neck-and-neck race, Barack Obama won Iowa, giving him the momentum to take the entire shebang, the first African-American to do so in the Iowa caucus. In 2012, Hope and Change Fever was relegated to the same position as Disco Fever. The Occupy movement and anti-war protesters tried to make a protest vote to vote uncommitted against Obama. Less than 100 people actually did this, however, but it showed that in 4 years, a lot had changed. We know that Iowa leads to tense and crazy caucuses, but why does this flyover state create such a crazy situation on the path of the presidency? To answer this, I'm going to tag team Will from Political Junkie News to fill you in.
Oh, man.
Hey, Tristan. Maybe the craziest thing about this Iowa caucus is the fact that none of the delegates to the National Party conventions will be selected on caucus night. You heard me right. All this media frenzy, all the expectations set, all the millions of dollars in ads, and absolutely zero of the delegates will be assigned to the national conventions. At least not until June. This is a result of Iowa's convoluted four-step delegate selection process. So let's look at the Democratic side to illustrate this. Participants in what we call the Iowa caucuses are actually participating in the Iowa precinct caucuses. Delegates chosen at this level then go on to several Iowa county conventions in March, where delegates are further filtered to district conventions in April and the state convention in the summer. So only right here are the national convention delegates selected. This can produce some really confusing results. In the 2012 Republican primary, both Rick Santorum and Mitt Romney, quote, won the Iowa precinct caucuses, tying with about 25% of the vote each. The media declared it a Santorum win by just a hair, then they moved on. Well, a few months later, after those precinct delegates had been through the district and state conventions so on, it was actually the third place finisher, Texas Congressman Ron Paul, who ended up winning 21 of 25 national unbound Iowa delegates, leading to confusing headlines like this one: Ron Paul just won the Iowa caucuses. But this headline was on June 16th. The moral of this story? The Iowa caucuses are narrative writers. The delegate count from caucus night isn't nearly as important as the momentum it generates. Barack Obama's Iowa win in 2008 wasn't about the representatives he sent to the county conventions. It was about the storyline that a one-term senator from Illinois had brought the heavyweight Clinton camp to the brink.
Thanks, Will. Also, everyone, you should check out the companion video to this and find out why Iowa always goes first. And there you have it. I'm sure more than a few of you are excited to see how the presidential campaign will officially begin. And be sure to check out an explanation on the importance of the Iowa caucus over at the Political Junkie News channel.
Man, how naive is that? That was back when, like, we didn't even know that the Sanders campaign had legs. Will from friggin' Political Junkie News had fewer subscribers than me, and we were working together on stuff. Like, geez. Okay. That was weird. Man, this video just is it's so old. And it's like not even it's like a little over 2 years old. It's not even 3 years old. Jeez. But yeah. We used to work together a lot on videos. If you guys, Political Junkie News is now called The Exploration, if you guys are at all curious about the channel. But, you know, you could subscribe to him. I mean, he's got enough subscribers, but, you know, it's a thing you could do. You think he's like, what? He's got like 141,000 subscribers now or something like that? All right. So the next video is, so this is the beginning of my like Badass Women of History series. And what happened is when I made my 5 People Who Changed the World video, somebody on Facebook was just like, how come there's no women on the list? And if anybody knows anything about me, is I have a very overactive guilt gland that if somebody points out that I did anything even remotely problematic, especially when it comes to gender, I will have a meltdown, and I will do anything at all to try and atone for my sins. And that's what this series ended up being. And I think it turned out all right. So let's watch one of those.
Hello, Internet. A few weeks ago, I made a list of 5 people I came across who changed the world. It was a fun video to do, but there was one notable problem.
Oh god, that's awful.
This week, I'm going to make my contribution to
Let's
Comic
never
Balance.
make a video like
Let's
that
talk
again.
about some amazing women that made huge contributions to the way we live in and see the world.
Gosh, my audio mixing is such a mess back then.
Number 1, Mary Montagu. Today, unless you're one of those people, you enjoy the benefits of vaccinations. Even more, I imagine you love living in a world without smallpox moving around and making a mess. Mary Montagu was one of the people that pushed England towards an early form of vaccinations, as well as shifting the way many people thought what women could do. Montagu is famous for being a noblewoman that traveled to and wrote about the Ottoman Empire. Her writings were called the first example of work by a woman about the Muslim world. She also introduced the Turkish method of inoculating against smallpox.
Oh man, look at this. It's a bunch of smallpox viruses with fezzes on. That's a good one. That's the pinnacle of humor right there.
This involved taking the stuff from a smallpox pustule and getting it under the skin. This would lead to a mild infection, but resulted in immunity. This is in the 18th century, long before the first vaccines. This traveler and fan of public health also changed the social order of the day. She asserted that women could participate in the public and intellectual realms just as the men could. Who knows how many
Yeah, I have no
Mary
idea
Montagu
how-
we missed out on for not taking her advice to heart.
I would just suspect. I bet if I looked at the retention graph of this video, right when like those buzzers start going off, it just goes way down, and like nobody watched past that point.
Number 2, Henrietta Lacks. Henrietta Lacks might be the only immortal person on Earth. Her story also shows the unfair practices of one's ownership over their own body. Lax's story begins in her last years of her life. Some cells from a cancerous tumor showed a remarkable property. They were essentially immortal. Without her permission, the cell line became the subject and tool of many an experiment. This cell line would go by the nickname HeLa after her name. One of the first applications of the HeLa line for science was used in developing a working vaccine for polio. When Jonas Salk needed to test the vaccine, Lax's cells were put in the first cell multiplication factory. In 1955, her cells were the first.
I just love this. This is how good I am at comedy. I just point to a clone trooper and I just say, bad movie. I am a comedic genius.
to be cloned. There was a huge demand on these amazing immortal cells. They've been used in cancer and AIDS research, poison and radiation testing, and early attempts to map genes. It's now anticipated they've grown 20 tons of Henrietta's cells. It wasn't until scientists went to find blood samples from her family that Henrietta Lacks's family even found out that her cells had been taken and used without permission. It was not general practice at the time to ask. By the 1980s, her cells were a commercial enterprise. Health records were taken, and her DNA was published in 2013 by a German scientist.
Not her actual DNA. Again, I am very funny.
All without permission. It actually wasn't until later that year that Lax's family finally won control over Henrietta's genetic code and recognition in scientific papers. I think where Henrietta Lax's story is really interesting is that her cells have lived through huge changes in the ethics of doing scientific research. We went from a simple cell culture taken to do some research to a commercial enterprise and copyrighted gene sequences. In many ways, she's a perfect case study when discussing bioethics. I also think we need to thank Henrietta for all the lives she saved without even knowing it. Tune in next time to find the next 3 women who programmed, collected, and wrote their way into the most influential people
Oh
in
boy,
history.
here we go.
What women from history do you...
This series was good. I think that this is an example of very good video idea and extraordinarily poor execution. I feel like the videos I made before this were of higher quality than the ones I made in this period. So I am not proud of the stuff I did in this era. I think it's because it was like February of 2016. So if I remember correctly, I was in the first year of my PhD, and I was a very busy boy, to say the least. Oh, we have a few questions. So why won't neocolonialism die? That's a very good question. If you have the answer to that, please say so, because I don't know, and it's bad. Money is a good one. How do you feel about former President Obama? The capitulator in chief? He's another example of kind of like somebody I fell out of love with very soon after they got elected, just like Justin Trudeau, and for pretty much the same reasons. Okay. All right, everybody. I said that this was like the period where I made some of the worst videos in my channel history, but we are about to watch what I think, I'm just assuming by the numbers, is the video that most of you have probably found Step Back with, because this video with over 200,000 views is the most popular video on Step Back. This is my video where I basically summarized the book of 1491 by Charles C. Mann. So let's watch that one.
Hello, Internet. Archaeologists are finding that the Americas before Columbus were very different than we initially believed. New discoveries in a wide variety of fields are finding that long-standing concepts of the pre-Columbian world are very different than what we thought.
This video has 200,000 views. That's so many.
So what has changed? First of all, the population of the Americas was way higher than even the most generous estimates we had before, and earlier than we thought. There was not simply one migration over the Bering Strait, but many migrations, and
can we just like talk for a second about
generous estimates we had
this
before.
picture here of me putting my face on a Pleistocene armadillo? Because, again, I am very funny.
Earlier than we thought. There was not simply one migration over the Bering Strait, but many migrations, and not all of them over the land bridge. Some of them came from Polynesia, which I discuss here, and some came by boat.
Where'd you get the intro animations from? I got them off Fiverr.
The estimates now put the pre-Columbian population of the Americas as high as 100 million people.
Oh my god, okay. The 100 million number is a very generous estimate, but it is an estimate. It is one that could be true. But holy crap, so many racists comment on this video talking about how I'm just a terrible liberal SJW because I said that number. It's so weird, because it's the higher number because, you know, it's a video, so I gotta, like, you know, go with the superlatives. But yeah, 100 million people over the two reasons why people might have done it. One, because they want to think that, because a lot of racists like to think that that the Columbian Exchange wasn't as apocalyptically genocidal as it was. Or two, they want to, they thought that I was just talking about the United States and not all of the Americas. So, like, I don't know. Why do people in the boats look like potatoes? Well, it's a reference to another video on the pre-Columbian Americas I made in 2015, in which I was talking about how the sweet potato moved across the Pacific and got to the Americas, and how that might be evidence that, like, people came from, like, the Polynesian Islands to South America. Is that boat your boat? Yes. Yeah, I drew that boat. It's made with like squares and triangles and trapezoids,
which I discuss here, and some came by boat. The estimates now put the pre-Columbian population of the Americas as high as 100
Have you heard of Hamatic theory? No, I
million
haven't.
people. Our earlier estimates of when the first humans came to the Americas comes from carbon dating of the earliest human remains we can find. However, doing these tests again, as well as genetics of those living in Siberia, show that the 13,000 year ago estimate might be off by as much as 10,000 years. We think that the exposure to European diseases moved ahead of the Europeans and gave them a warped view of what populations were like in the Americas. We also now believe that diseases played a bigger role in the decline of native societies than warfare with Europeans. For example, people for a long time thought that horses helped Francisco Pizarro beat the Incas. When you look at where the Incas lived, up in the mountains relying on stairways, you immediately see the issue here. Second, the level of cultural advancement and settlement range of native groups was much larger than we thought. Partly to blame is that many innovations came from Mesoamerica or modern-day Mexico, but their geographic isolation meant that not a ton of their technologies left the region.
This is another thing to mention. I don't think this made it into the video, but there is now an increasing amount of evidence that a lot of people lived in the Amazon, in what would become the Amazon rainforest, and that there was a period in which that if we were to do some more exploration of the Amazon rainforest, we would find the remnants of a whole lot more civilizations. And some people think that the Amazon might have been cultivated in a sense. That a lot of the trees in the Amazon seem to be useful to humans and planted intentionally. It's of course since grown over since the death, since the Columbian Exchange, but we keep finding more and more evidence deep in the Amazon that there was a large civilization that lived in the Amazon. Yeah. So that's cool.
That inability to share ideas and access to large beasts of burden hindered many developments that Eurasians had access to. Take, for example, our ideas about guns. We commonly think that European colonists bringing guns gave them a huge advantage. In fact, natives mocked these noisemakers, which were loud, cumbersome, and much harder to aim than a bow and arrow. The famous John Smith
so many funny jokes in this short period here.
We got a huge
you have to
advantage.
give them all the attention
In fact,
they deserve.
Natives mocked these noisemakers.
Bang. Good stuff.
Which were loud.
Guns were loud. Unrelated picture of Donald Trump. The same joke I used in my previous video. So, you know how smart I am there.
Loud, cumbersome.
Cumbersome. So, picture of Benadryl or crinkle fries or butternut crinkle fries.
And much harder to aim than a bow and arrow. The famous John...
I also thought that John Smith looked like freaking Ron Swanson, so there you go.
Smith, yes, that John Smith, wrote that, quote, "The awful truth, the gun, could not shoot as far as an arrow could fly."
Oh my god, this is another one that I've gotten so many comments about. Where I made the point that, guns were not as good as bows and arrows, pound for pound, especially in, the, 16th century when, the first Columbian Exchange stuff happened. And so many people got mad because they don't understand that, yeah, a lot of people switched to guns because they were cheaper and easier to train, or they weren't cheaper to make, but they were easier to train somebody on their usage. And so, it was more economical. But they weren't more accurate than bows and arrows until, the 19th century. Even that, the late 19th century. And so it's just this is a thing I've been getting for years because I still get comments on this video.
Another great example would be the genetic miracle that is corn. Maize developed from an inedible grass, but native farmers genetically engineered it through
Oh man, so many people got mad that I used the word genetic engineering.
Selective breeding into the huge varieties of corn we have today. And if you don't live in Latin America, you really don't know how crazy cool varieties of corn have developed. This led to the rise of civilizations like the Olmec. Other technologies of native societies surpassed what Europeans had. Moccasins, for example, were more comfortable and sturdy than European boots. Everyone wanted them because the padding made them move silently, which helped in hunting and in war. Canoes were faster and could maneuver better than any European small boats. Lastly, the New World was not the wilderness we imagined it was. Native groups across the Americas shaped the ecology to their benefit, mostly through the use of selective fires. Take the Mayans, for example. Many blame their collapse on the overloading the carrying capacity of their environment, showing that they had huge impacts on their surroundings. There's plenty of evidence that many native groups use slash and burn techniques to shape the landscape to their needs. Burning down forests encouraged grasslands that could be cultivated or attract game animals. They domesticated fewer animals and cultivated plants in a different way than Europeans, but no less intensely. European settlers simply were unable to appreciate this, likely due to language issues and good old-fashioned racism.
Oh yeah, that's another one that people this is like them, you'll watch as we go over 2016. I get more and more like snarky and political, and this is another one where people got super mad that I mentioned that your racism is a thing that exists. Oh my god, people were like, no, that can't possibly be it. Oh god.
This has been going on for so long that natives became a keystone species in the ecosystem, and the mass deaths from disease actually led to huge ecological changes to the continent, still happening today. Their decline likely led to large population explosions for bison and passenger pigeons, as well as the reforestation of most of the continent, all in time for the Europeans to show up in a region and claim that the natives weren't using the land. As the inspiration for this video, Charles Mann said, they used the entire continent as a garden. These developments get me a special kind of excited. I became a historian because I get thrilled when I find out something we took for granted for centuries turns out to be a gross misunderstanding of something far more amazing. I should also mention that this video is heavily inspired by Charles Mann's amazing book, 1491. If this blows your mind as much as it did mine, I could not recommend it more. I will see you guys next time. If you have any similar stories...
Alright, so we should talk about 1491 a little bit, because I did get a question about what I thought about Guns, Germs, and Steel. And 1491, I think, if you are a person who really, really likes 1491, or really, really likes Guns, Germs, and Steel, 1491 is a book you'll really like, but it will be a bit of a splash of cold water in your face, because it shows that when you get somebody who actually approaches things like a historian, that the very simplistic, scientist-inspired idea that was the Guns, Germs, and Steel theory is way less applicable than it makes out to be. And the whole thing about friggin' Jared Diamond and his whole thing is like very what's called ecologically determinist, and you end up with people like Cody, who thinks that Africa will never be able to develop into a place that is free of poverty because of geography, when it's not true. It undermines the legacy. Like, I think that one of the things that people say is like, oh, like, why did Native American people have all these disadvantages? And it's like, they didn't have that many disadvantages. Like, when the Europeans arrived, like, Europe wasn't all that advanced. And so, like, yeah, there was, like, a few key inventions that they didn't have. But for the most part, like, it wasn't as unequal as people make it out to be. It wasn't like the Victorian age where, like, people had, like, the Browning rifle and, like, people didn't. Like, it wasn't like the Battle of the Red River or anything like that. It was, if pound for pound, they could have held their own. It's just the fact that disease basically killed, like, 80 to 90% of the population of the continent. That is the reason why the Europeans, like the disease, like, wiped out entire civilizations. Then Europeans showed up in basically, like, a post-apocalyptic wasteland, and then we're like, man, these people are living such backwards lives. What a surprise. And it's like, and this is, like, the myth that has persisted to today. And so if you want to justify European conquest, or if this video came out at, like, the peak of, like, the alt-right and stuff like that, that, like, they would make this argument that, like, these people were like that these people were inferior because, of course, they have to be inferior because they're not white. And so this, like, loses, this is in direct contradiction to their theory. Guns, Germs, and Steel does not say these things. Guns, Germs, and Steel does say that germs played a big role, but look at the three things in that list. So guns, for example, guns did not play as big a role in the conquest of the Americas as people think it is. That's like a Victorian construction from when they had like the Gatling gun and they were fighting like people in South Africa. That's a very different situation. But actually, like, early guns were kind of useless because nobody knew how to use them, and they were really inaccurate. And so, like, you know, natives with, like, bows and arrows could, like, go around people. But also, Guns, Germs, and Steel comes to the thesis that, like, they had all of these geographical disadvantages, and so that's why they were behind. What I would argue is that they weren't that far behind. And that the reason why the Europeans did so well in the did so well while the people in the Americas did not, has more to do with the colonial mindset and the sheer dumb luck of the disease transfer that it's trying to almost absolve white people of their guilt in the genocide that occurred in the Americas. Trying to, like, say, like, no, it was, like, bound to be this way, but it's, like, not really. You could argue that, like, the time when Columbus made his voyage, that the Chinese were far superior technologically to the Europeans. And they didn't conquer the world. Like, by Jared Diamond's Guns, Germs, and Steel logic, the Chinese should have conquered the world. But why didn't they? And it's like, different culture. Wasn't interested in conquering as much. Wasn't interested in colonizing. So there's other stuff that didn't really get, like, acknowledged. But the thing is that Guns, Germs, and Steel feels like it makes sense because it's like a scientific theory. Scientific theories are always, like, neat and categorized and, like, you know, have no exceptions and everything works out. And, like, that's not how history works. And so, like, a lot of historians really don't like Jared Diamond because he's this ornithologist who wanders in and is like, oh, I'm a scientist. History's not, like, a real science. Obviously, a scientist could write history better than historians. So without consulting any other historians, I'm going to write this book that has this huge overarching theory of how history works, and it's going to be grossly inaccurate and not take into fact, like, all of the exceptions, and then I'm going to get way more attention than any other historian who works on these issues. And it's like, oh, okay. So yeah, there's, like, a lot of historians have, like, about Jared Diamond. Yeah, like, the reason why, like people will use the Guns, Germs, and Steel argument to say, like, this is why, there was a documentary that was made about Guns, Germs, and Steel, in which Jared Diamond goes to sub-Saharan Africa and shows that, like, these people are behind because of, like, all of these things. And it's like, they're not behind because of, like, I mean, malaria is a little bit of the reason why, but the reason why they can't fight malaria is not because we haven't found a cure for malaria. It's because they're poor. And the reason they're poor is not because they don't have the right resources or anything like that. They definitely do. Like, Congo, for example, is sitting on some of the most valuable minerals on the planet, but it's because of colonization, and it's because of the theft and the destruction of this land by Europeans. And so, like, it's like, this is sub-Saharan Africa. And so, like, sub-Saharan Africa would be probably one of the richest areas on Earth today if it wasn't for the fact that the Belgians killed, like, 20% of the Congolese population in the 1910s. You know? and then like abandoned, like destroyed all of their indigenous government, and then put in place like a brutal dictator that led to like and made these giant borders that don't follow any sort of ethnic lines, and so there's all sorts of like civil war and stuff. Like it's just it's like I don't want to make anybody feel bad for liking Guns, Germs, and Steel, because like this is very much like a thing that this is like a fight that really only happens in like academia. Like Guns, Germs, and Steel, I think actually, like I don't think that Jared Diamond is like, I don't think that he's like a bad person or anything like that. Like his book comes from a like legitimate position of empathy with these people. I think it's like inspired by his like trips to like New Guinea or something like that. But but there's more going on. And this is kind of what I'm trying to do with Step Back, is like, I'm trying to be a voice for history on YouTube, because there really isn't one in like this kind of academic area. And on top of that, there's a lot of popular history that's bad, where like, can you imagine what would happen if I just decided that I knew some grand theory about quantum mechanics, and then I wrote a book about it, and then I said, look, I'm a historian. Historians are smarter than scientists, so I'm just going to write this book about quantum mechanics, despite the fact that I'm not a theoretical physicist, and I'm going to just, you know, publish this book and get way more attention. And it's like, the quantum physicists will have all sorts of issues with the things I said, but it just shows that like there's like this bias in favor of like the STEM fields, that like an ornithologist can be considered a better source on history than like historians. I don't want to take like, yeah, it's. Yeah, like Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson's another example. He is a person he's a psychologist. I say a psychologist with like a lot of quotations, because he uses psychology that has not been considered like true or viable or of making any sense whatsoever since like the 1930s. He's like a what the hell's that guy's name? Who's the archetypes guy?
What?
Carl Jung. He's like a Jungian psychologist, and like no psychologist has taken Carl Jung seriously in like decades. Got close slack. So he's like, when studying Carl Jung, like Carl Jung's used in like literary studies now, but he's not used in psychology. Psychology is like Carl Jung comes from like when psychology was just a bunch of white dudes like smoking cigars and just writing what they think about things. Like Carl Jung comes from like the age when like they thought that depression in women was like the cause of them being envious of their dad's penis. Like psychology's come a long way since then. They do experiments now and stuff. Because like people like Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung just kind of pulled shit out of their ass and said, "Look, I am a fancy scientist." So Peterson is already like this psychologist that I would imagine the psychological field does not take seriously, and probably just doesn't get fired over the fact that he is probably got tenure. And he's published like 2 books, and one of them's a self-help book. Like, oh god, he's not even a good psychologist. But yeah, it's another example of like when someone who's not very like has no reason to be considered an expert in the thing they're talking about, and that they come in and talk about anyway. Well, like Pavlov, like, so James Davis is talking about Pavlov. Pavlov actually is like a pretty legit psychologist, right, Kelly?
Pavlov?
He'd be considered like, because he did experiments, like he's
Yeah,
considered
yeah.
like a legit psychologist. Like classical conditioning is considered a pretty true thing. I mean, there's a lot more nuance to it, but, you know, it's been decades of development. All right, my next video is part 2 of that top 5 women who changed the world. So let's get into that.
Hello, Internet. Humanity has done some amazing things. And
Oh man. Okay, we're already starting off on a good.
Hello,
thing here.
Internet.
Humanity has done some amazing things, and it's a picture of a double down. So you know that I'm already off to a good start.
Has done some amazing things and created some beautiful works. This week, I want to continue the series of badass women in history by honoring 3 amazing ladies.
But you should
These
also
women-
talk about the fact that you used to wear the same shirt.
Oh, yes. So, like, one of the things I used to do is when I started animating my old videos, I used to make my shirt the same color that it was when I was making the video. And so, unfortunately, the hoodie that I'm wearing in this video, it's in the laundry right now. But yeah, it's like, I used to do that. I used to, like, just look at, like, what shirt I was wearing that day, and I made my shirt that color. It's like one of those little touches that I kind of stopped doing.
Women were great
And also the Typhone. That is a very good joke. I don't know why.
contributors to technology, science, and the arts. We will meet the people
Oh
history
god. Okay.
by honoring
Let's get to
3
this again.
amazing ladies. These women were great contributors to technology,
There we go. Good news, everyone. It's funny. That might be a joke that Kelly didn't get at the time, but now would get it.
science, and the arts.
There's me posing on a couch for a painting.
We will meet the people who made sure Apollo 11 landed on the moon, pioneered the field of paleontology,
There you go, clever girl.
and produced some of history's most famous poetry you've never read.
Oh man.
Margaret Hamilton. Margaret Hamilton is one of the pioneers we can thank for getting people on the moon. When she took an internship at MIT to work on software to predict the weather, Hamilton was well on her way to becoming a software
Look at that.
giant. In the early 60s, there was no computer science and no software engineering. Programmers learned on the job, and in stark contrast to Silicon Valley today, were mostly women. She then joined up with the famous SAGE program.
Oh,
This
hey, it's the
program
girl
is
that's
known
been
for making
noticed.
Huge advancements in computer technology in order to build a networked radar system that could sniff out enemy aircraft entering U.S. airspace. Hamilton did so well at SAGE that she attracted the attention of NASA. She transferred to a lab at MIT, doing work for them, and quickly became the director of software programming for both Apollo and Skylab. Many of the projects she worked on are foundational, important mechanics of modern software design. Hamilton's team worked out the guidance software.
Yeah, look at this. The guidance software for the Apollo 11 is a pile of books. Oh man, I can't imagine that. Like, we have calculators that are more sophisticated than the computers that got us to the moon.
On the Apollo 11 mission. And it's a good thing, too, as it prevented the abort of the mission to land on the moon at a critical phase. Because of the architecture her team developed, the computer was able to recover from an overload and got Apollo on the moon. Afterwards, she took her methods and started 2 businesses. This includes asynchronous software, where the computer splits a complicated program into smaller ones and solves them all in a parallel structure. Human-in-the-loop decision capability, which allows humans to see variables going into a calculation before, in order to ensure everything is moving along nicely. Priority scheduling, and end-to-end testing. Lastly, she popularized the term software engineering. When NASA was developing some of the most advanced technologies of the 20th century, Margaret Hamilton was their go-to for software, which arguably has become the most important developments of our age. Mary Anning. Okay, so like many young people, I had a thing for dinosaurs. I still have to see them when I go to a museum, and annoy anyone I'm with musing about how unbelievable such alien giants actually being real is. I also am prone to
Oh man, this is a picture of when Kelly and I went to the War Museum in Canada, and they were doing a gladiator exposition, and I wore a gladiator helmet.
giving long context about artifacts in the museum. Basically, I'm kind of the worst.
Oh, and this is a museum that Kelly took me to the first time I went to, or one of the first times I went to Chicago to see my become my in-laws, and that's a giant submarine that's underground in the what's it called, the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago.
Worst person to go with. Mary Anning changed the way many of us see ancient life and even the age of the Earth.
I like it. Night Watcher would like this little gig.
She was one of the first paleontologists and one of the most famous fossil collectors in history. Her haunt was the cliffs of Dorset County in England. She would, very dangerously I might add, search for fossils before they'd be reclaimed by the sea. These collections would contain the first ichthyosaur, the first two plesiosaurs, the first pterosaur, and several ancient fish. I know someone is already
You sucks, LOL. I still use this every once in a while when I'm anticipating nasty comments.
typing in the comments section about how these aren't all dinosaurs, and while I admit you're correct, I will raise you the sound of millions of crying 8-year-olds. Good job. You just made all of our inner children cry. While Mary was making these mind-boggling discoveries, she wasn't involved in the He-Man Women Haters Club that...
Oh man, if anybody can get this reference, it just made a reference to the He-Man Woman Haters Club, and I had this little sticking up hair thing. If you can get that reference, you're a winner.
represented scientists of this era. The English scientists of the age got together and all agreed that she was just too female and too poor to be a scientist. You know who did like her though? Geologists. She became famous in the Western world and would often be asked to consult on ancient anatomy and the methods of collecting fossils. Alas, much like the scientists, the Geological Society determined
Look at hashtag not all men scientists, but probably most. Oh man, I'm getting more and more snarky every video.
that she had but one X chromosome too many to be a geologist. She never got full credit for any of her discoveries. In her own words, "The world has used me so unkindly. I fear it has made me suspicious of everyone. The only time anyone would publish her work was a letter to the editor of a magazine. Better late than never, after her death, she finally won some recognition. A book in 1865 tried to get people to make her name one that was famous. And in 2010, the Royal Society decided to include her in a list of the most influential British women in the history of science. Sadly, her story is not uncommon, and many of our scientific discoveries have been made on the uncredited work of awesome women who were never given a chance by their peers. Sappho. We've lost so much art. I don't just mean we
Oh man, this is another good one.
can't find where it's hiding.
It's a really bad Carmen Sandiego reference, because she always steals things.
But so many things no longer exist. Let's look at ancient Greece, for example. What we know as the famous Greek plays, stories, poems, and philosophies are a tiny sliver of what was there. And I have to say that the loss of Sappho's work might be one of the biggest losses of art we've ever had. We don't know too much about Sappho. She was born in the 5th century BCE on Lesbos and wrote poetry, most of which no longer exists. Here's the thing, we can tell that she might have been the J.K. Rowling of her day. Her writing is referred to often as some of the best of antiquity, and yet almost none of it survives today. Here's what has survived. We have parts of a bunch of her poems, but only 2 complete ones. This is someone who published multiple books of poetry. She had a long legacy in the age of antiquity, with many adorers who called her one of the greatest lyric poets of all time. I simply finish with a quote about her ascribed to Plato. "Some say the muses are 9. How careless. Look, there's Sappho too, from Lesbos, the 10th. That's all for now. If you have any suggestions for new badass women of history, tell me about them in the comments.
So was she a TERF like JK? I really highly doubt it. But also, I did not know that JK Rowling was shit back then. All right, but yeah, that was a fun series, and it never got as much attention as I'd wish it had, and I've always kind of resented that. Yeah. Okay, so the next one on my list is my second religion video, and it is pretty popular too. So let's watch that one. It's my voodoo video. Anybody who found my channel through the voodoo video?
Hello,
My videos also used to be a lot shorter. I feel like when we get closer to the end of this this rewatch series, it's going to get a lot more long.
Internet. When I say the word voodoo, what do you think of? You might think of eerie magic, witch doctors, dolls of...
Oh yeah, this is another joke I used to do a lot. I used to troll Will by just just doing nasty things to him in all my videos with this cutout head of his. You'll keep finding it in a whole bunch of videos, but it's good stuff.
Of your enemies, or even zombies. I'm going to dispel the myths here and talk about not only this very misunderstood religion, but also how it's a cool example of when religions mix. The Caribbean is a fascinating melting pot of cultures. It was the first region colonized by
There you go. Finally first at something.
Europeans, and has been the place for numerous cultures of European, Native American, and, important for today, African people to mix. Europeans brought over Africans as slaves, and tried to convert them to Christianity. African people, however, already had a form of religion. While it didn't have popes and books of rules,
Oh man, look at this. This is a reference. I didn't even play D&D yet, but look at this. Holy Bible 4th edition, and then someone saying 3.5 is better. I don't even know. I totally did not know what I was talking about in this. I guess I probably knew that people hated 4th edition, but like, this is a D&D reference. But this is a D&D reference like over a year before I started playing D&D, so I don't know.
the rituals and beliefs of all
Past
sorts
Tristan definitely does need to work on his audio balance.
were already there. This is when interesting stuff happens. Their spirituality was more flexible than the strict Abrahamic faiths, and so instead of abandoning their beliefs for the new ones, they merged together. This is what we call syncretism. This might sound weird to us. How can people follow more than one religion? Well, that comes from the point of view of the Abrahamic religions, which are actually kind of weird. Religions like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are considered exclusivist religions, meaning that they believe that they have the monopoly on truth without openness to other practices. They might be tolerant of other faiths, but the point of them is that they have the right way. It's this kind of thinking that shows why the Abrahamic faiths are so split into a billion tiny sects. This isn't the case.
This is a good joke. That's a picture of Isis in Roman mythology. Because this is a reference to how the Romans adopted, or syncretically, the Egyptian goddess Isis. But then I made the joke Isil, because that was still a thing.
With most faiths. Hey, that rhymes. If I have my god, gods, demigods, spirits, or rituals, and I come in contact with others, we might simply exchange ideas. If they have a god we like, we might adapt it.
This is Zeus adapted to the god Amun-Ra. I think there's a lot of cool shit like this that you find in classical things that you should really look up.
Sometimes, if one religion conquers another, adopting some of their religion might be part of the conquest, or they might do it for diplomatic reasons. This is why the Greeks worshipped
Yeah, that is a Greek Anubis statue.
Egyptian gods. Romans worshipped renamed Greek gods, and why Santa is about two saints and a Norse god mashed together. Now let's talk about voodoo. Voodoo is actually multiple faiths under the umbrella of Afro-American religions. The main varieties are based mostly on location. The main flavor of voodoo are Dominican, Louisiana, and Haitian. Let's begin with Haitian voodoo, arguably the most recognizable sect. Practitioners are typically called voodooists. They believe in a god, but it's a distant, unknowable being called bon Dieu, which comes from the French bon Dieu. Since this god doesn't involve itself in human affairs, worship is directed to subservient deities called Loa. There are different Loa for different...
Oh man, look at this reference. I imagine a lot more people will get this one than other ones.
domains of life. In their lives, voodooists try to maintain personal relationships with the Loa. This can be done by giving offerings.
There's this little fruitcake from my Christmas video.
Making altars, creating small devotional items, or by doing elaborate songs, dances, or spiritual possession. Their practices are mostly followed from a variety of African religious traditions, such as Vodun, and the practices of the Fon and Iu. They incorporate Catholicism, European mysticism, and Freemasonry. The Vadun influence also arrived on the shores of America. In Louisiana, where West African, French, Spanish, and Creole cultures overlapped for centuries, a different voodoo took hold. It's very much a product of the cultural mixing of the Atlantic slave trade. It's distinct, but not completely separate from American hoodoo and Haitian voodoo. But it's unique. They use talismans called grigri, borrowed from West Africa. The grigri actually incorporate parts of the Quran and are used as birth control. They also put more emphasis on famous female practitioners called voodoo queens. The most famous of those is Marie Laveau, who might be a great candidate for a badass women of history. Dominican voodoo,
I should do a Marie
spelled
Laveau
like
video.
this, actually has its own subgroups based on which spirits they honor. They can either be Native American, African, or European spirits. It's the indigenous ones that make Dominican voodoo different. It has many of the trappings of Catholicism, but with a few extra gods. These deities, as I said, called Loa, are Anisa Pai, the deity of love and happiness, Beli Belkan, of justice and protection from demons, Philomena, of dominance over men, Ogun Belendo, of warriors and of soldiers, Barun, of death, and Metresli, of love, beauty, and wealth. These deities are also mixed with various Catholic...
Oh, someone's like said this is like Santeria, and it's like, yeah, this video, when I first went to go make it, was actually supposed to be a video about voodoo and Santeria and talk about syncretism, but then the voodoo stuff took up so much space that I had to drop the Santeria part.
like saints and popular Christian figures. So voodoo is not scary, eerie stuff, but a diverse set of religious beliefs created by the huge movement of people around the Caribbean world. Their religion is somewhere between the African traditions slaves brought with them and the Catholicism of their masters. Do you know any cool instances of syncretism? When
The videos also used to be a lot shorter back then. Hey, there's 43 of you in here. That's pretty cool. All right, so that was like a voodoo video, and that video it wasn't a success when it first came out, but it has become a sleeper hit because I think there's not a lot of videos on voodoo on YouTube, and so it's gotten a lot of search traffic and like more times. Someone wants my email? Sure, let me just type it out for you. There you go. All right. So the next video was when this one also was pretty successful. This is probably the one where I get like explicitly political, and it kind of just goes from there. The next few videos, like the next videos for like the next until now, start getting like more explicitly political. So this is about the Colfax massacre, which is like one of the most important events in like American post-Reconstruction history, or post-Civil War history, but no one talks about it because it makes white people look bad. So I did a video about it, and then I talked about Trump in it, and so you can just imagine that that's a thing. You can imagine how that went. So we're like in April of 2016 at this point, and you can just see I got a little bit of Trump derangement syndrome over 2016, to the point where like by the end of the year I got so bad.
Hey folks, I'm going to try to avoid names, but right now in Europe and the United States, there is a lot of political violence that has become very racial. One of the presidential candidates in the 21st century is campaigning on as close to an openly racist ticket I think someone can.
Oh, sweet summer child. How innocent I was.
To say my piece, I'm going to talk about one dark corner of U.S. history, where we can learn that then, as now, politics is more than just rhetoric. Under the pageantry, it is dead dark corner of U.S. history.
Second, I just
where
want to
we
get
can
one part
learn
here.
that then, as now, politics is more than just rhetoric. Under the
A 6-year-old escorted to school by U.S. Marshals. I think we don't appreciate how much a 6-year-old girl had to be escorted to school by U.S. Marshals. And this woman is still alive.
The pageantry, it is deadly serious. This is the story of the Colfax Massacre. I warn you that this is going to be quite a bit darker than my normal videos.
This is going to be quite a bit darker than my regular videos. Well, that sure changed.
Before I begin, we must have one short aside about American politics. The political parties in the US shift ideologies and constituencies over time, and in this moment, we have a pro-business, anti-slavery Northern Republican Party allied with newly freed black people in the South. The Democrats are a Southern, farmer-focused, white supremacist party in the South, largely made up of politicians from the old Confederacy. Okay, let's start. We begin in 1866. Louisiana was just taken out of federal occupation following the Civil War.
Well, this is good. I wanted to incorporate more storytelling into my videos, and this is a good example of it because this video was really successful, so I guess I should have listened to myself in the past.
Congress, in open revolt against President Andrew Johnson, passed the Civil Rights Act of 1866. This ended the black codes passed by former Confederates in the southern states, which basically stripped the newly freed black population of nearly all their rights. In 1868, this new law allowed for a biracial coalition to elect a majority Republican state legislature in Louisiana, which is an amazing victory, but we began to see resentment build. From April to November of 1868, over 1,000 political murders terrorized Louisiana Republicans, almost all of them black. The president's response?
There we go.
Over 1,000 political murders terrorized Louisiana Republicans, almost all of them black. The president.
I revert back to my scumbag Steve joke. Here's the thing. I think I have like 10 total jokes, and I just use them over and over again.
President's response? He tried his best to prevent Louisiana's governor from using state militia or U.S. forces to stop groups like the Knights of the White Camellia, a terrorist group closely associated with the Ku Klux Klan. Colfax was in Grant Parish. Black men came to cast their votes, despite threats and moving ballot boxes. The Republicans won overwhelmingly, and the white community responded by throwing the ballot box in the river and arresting William Calhoun. He was a former slave owner with a common-law black wife and turned into a fighter for black political equality. Black Republican and election commissioner Hal Frazier, a black wife.
Wait. I gotta get this one.
Into a fighter for black political equality.
Black Republican, and then I have a picture of Herman Cain. That's not a good joke. I should not have done that.
Republican and election commissioner Hal Frazier was shot by the white mob. President Grant in 1869 tried to change the dynamic going on in the South. He lobbied for the 15th Amendment, guaranteeing black people full citizenship and the right to vote. This led to redoubled efforts by the KKK and other terrorist groups. In 1871, Congress passed a number of laws to use the army to suppress the Klan from terrorizing black communities. In 1872, the Republican governor of Louisiana began to oppose Reconstruction and demand that former Confederates get to vote again. Through him, a coalition of anti-Reconstruction Republicans and Democrats conspired to take over the government and put white supremacists into key political positions. The 1872 election resulted.
Does anyone notice that the guy on the left looks a lot like Bryan Cranston? Or is that just me?
Resulted in the state having two governments, one for rebuilding a free South and one demanding white supremacy. This did not result in House floor debates. Those favoring white supremacy took the government by force, using a paramilitary group to overwhelm the state militia. For 3 days, they occupied New Orleans until federal troops could force them to surrender. In Colfax, the black citizens literally dug in to defend the Republican government in the courthouse from Democrat-allied paramilitary groups. On March 28th, white supremacists in the parish called for white citizens to reinstate a democratic government by force. The black defenders refused to give in to threats by the white mob that came to take away their rights. The mob acquired cannons, brought in Confederate veterans and Klan members. On Easter Sunday, 300 white men with rifles and horses marched on the Colfax courthouse. Their leader asked the women and children to leave, and after 30 minutes began firing on them. Some tried to flee, and the mob gunned them down where they stood. The other defenders surrendered, but it fell on deaf ears. The white paramilitary mob massacred the black defenders of the courthouse, dumping their bodies in the river. About 50 were taken prisoner and killed that night. Only one black man survived. It showed how far people would go to defend white supremacy, and the black population would remember this event for years to come. The state militia managed to find and indict about 100 of them. Many ran away and hid out west. Historians consider it the bloodiest incident in the history of Reconstruction. Their cases went as high as the Supreme Court, and none of them were prosecuted. This ruling encouraged the rise of white paramilitary groups in the South. They used violence to terrorize black leaders and white Republicans, as well as suppress black voters. It was this that put the governments of the South back in the hands of the Democrats and ensured white supremacy would rule there for nearly 100 years. To put salt on this wound, in 1950, the state of Louisiana made a highway marker that called it the Colfax Riot and called it the end of carpetbag misrule in the South. Only recently is the massacre moving out of the realm of obscure local history, and historians are uncovering its key role in the story of Reconstruction and race relations. In 2016, I also think we should pause to know that
This is like, if you remember that dude at a Trump rally who just like decked a random black protester. Jesus Christ.
violence in politics can very easily escalate and take us to dark places. Please, down in the comments, talk about how we can use historical events like the Colfax Massacre to decry violence wherever it rears its head. And I'll see you all in 2 weeks for another Step Back.
Damn. Well, that was a thing. That one makes me sad, but I feel very proud that I made that. I think that that would have been, yeah. Shit, son. So I think I basically just called like the whole thing. Jeez. Yeah, that one made me sad. The next video I made after that came out on April 16th, and if I recall correctly, I think I was like held up with like essays or something. So instead of doing a regular Step Back video, I just posted a podcast that I used to do for the Graduate Students Association, in which I was interviewed about how we got from the party of Lincoln to the party of Trump. I'm not gonna watch that one for you because it doesn't really have anything interesting to look at, but that's what this video is. It has 9,000 views, which I'm surprised that it got that many. But now what do you think of Innuendo Studios? Innuendo Studios is good. They're a good channel. I really like the alt-right playbook. I think it's one of the things that I think we should be teaching a lot, and like in schools and stuff. The Colfax Massacre video makes me think that I should do like a Civil War series or something. Anyways, this is another one of my most popular videos. It has 75,000 views, and it's another collaboration with Will Fox. So let's go take a look. And also, this video is one of those ones where, like, this is definitely a video where, like, a lot of people got mad at me because this is probably the first video, but it's the first one of many in which my, like, vitriolic hatred for Islamophobia comes out. And this is the first time I ever said, hey, maybe Muslims aren't all evil monsters. And holy shit, do people not take that well.
Hey folks, today we're going to look at Daesh, or as the news call them, ISIS. Now, I could burrow into the story of how the weird, unique situation that allowed a group like ISIS like Daesh to thrive, but I am going to leave that story to my buddy Will over at Political Junkie News. What I'm going to show you is that Daesh are actually not very good Muslims.
Yeah, so the video that Will did on the same subject, the kind of collaboration here, actually went really well for him. It was like a timeline of Islam, but this was my side of the collaboration.
So to preface, I'm not a Muslim, nor am I an imam, but this does come from a report from a collection of imams qualified to discuss what does and does not follow Islamic law. That said, let's dig in. First of all, in Islam, those who are not Muslims, but under the category of people of the scripture, which includes Jews, Christians, and important for this case, Yazidis, can get an extra
Likely future video. Yazidis. My Yazidi video came out like a month ago, and this was made in May of 2016. So, you know, have patience, I guess.
tax, but cannot be brutally murdered, displaced, or tortured. Muslims are not supposed to do many things that ISIS has not only done, but broadcasted and bragged about. This includes the wonderful list of horrors, such as denying women their rights, forcing conversion, disfiguring the dead, and destroying the graves of prophets and companions. ISIS also seems to lack an understanding of what jihad means. Jihad means struggle.
All right.
Disfiguring the dead, and destroying the graves of prophets and companions. ISIS also seems to lack an understanding of what jihad means. Jihad means struggle.
All right. So this is a Pokemon reference. If anybody can explain, if anybody gets why I said jihad means struggle and then had this, you are also a Pokemon nerd just like me.
And is purely defensive. Pushing smelly crusaders out of the Holy Land? Jihad. Planning to conquer the world? Not jihad.
Oh man, people really didn't like that one either because I said crusaders were smelly and that they were invading Muslim territory. And they didn't like that answer even though it was true.
Jihad is not just a willy-nilly thing. There are actually quite a lot of rules, and it has to have a very good purpose. Ever hear the term, "don't shoot the messenger"? Well, it's a common code of ethics and part of Islamic law to not kill messengers, such as emissaries, ambassadors, or diplomats. Many imams feel that this also applies to journalists and aid workers. Despite
They were smelly. Crusaders were smelly as shit. Like, what's it called? Crusaders they grew big beards and they were wearing armor and they were like in the desert and they like got all sweaty and stuff. But on top of that, like, so they got all, like, they were all gross, but also they never bathed. And like, Muslims, like, as part of their religion, have to bathe basically every day. And like, during the Spanish Inquisition, they used to try to find if anybody was a secret Muslim. They would actually, one of the things that they could accuse somebody who were like, because they were always looking for people who converted to Christianity but weren't actually converted and they were still practicing their religion secretly. And like, one of the ways that they thought that they could find somebody who was a secret Muslim was that they were too clean, that they bathed too often. So if you were too not dirty, they would consider you, maybe you were a secret Muslim.
what ISIS says, loyalty to a nation is actually permissible. In fact, since the Prophet died, Islam doesn't require anyone to emigrate anywhere. Also, ISIS, if you're listening out there are actually a lot of legal codes you forgot to read up on. Your list of legal issues include oversimplifying Sharia matters, ignoring Islamic sciences, disallowing disagreement in Islamic scholarship, giving legal rulings without mastery of Arabic, cherry-picking the Quran and hadiths to make legal rulings, reintroducing slavery after it was abolished. And of course, this all comes from the legal issue of plain just not considering the reality of contemporary times when making legal rulings. And there's one last one, and it's a big one. ISIS considers itself a caliphate, a very important word in Islam. I am going to pass off this particular infraction to my more politically inclined friend Will from Political.
More politically inclined. Oh, the days.
Junkie News.
Hey Tristan, when the Islamic State declared a new caliphate in 2014, it was met with universal disdain. Everyone from world politicians, fellow Muslims, both Sunni and Shia alike, even other extremist militant groups fighting alongside them, criticized the declaration as fantasy. In the Islamic world, a caliph is the steward of the Islamic community, and a religious successor to the Prophet Muhammad. The first three caliphs after Muhammad's death in 632 were successful in expanding Islamdom, known as the Ummah, into the depths of the Persian and Byzantine empires. But the area of agreement basically ends there. A bit like the split in Christianity, Shia Muslims believe that the fourth caliph, Ali, the cousin of Muhammad, was the correct next caliph. When Ali was deposed by Muawiyah in 661, Shias believed the direct bloodline of Muhammad was drained from the caliphate. To put it shortly, no Shia Muslim would accept any Sunni caliphate, like ISIS is now declaring, much less an extreme one like the Islamic State. Now, among Sunni Muslims, the first requirement to be caliph is to be a descendant of the Quraysh tribe, like Muhammad, an Arabian clan from Mecca. Islamic State leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is from Iraq, so that's probably not the case. The general belief is that a caliph should be chosen by community consensus. Community consensus doesn't mean that everyone votes. Rather, it means that scholars and the powerful, a consultative council, decide. Al-Baghdadi actually built himself a cabinet and Sharia council into the infrastructure of ISIS, perhaps to fulfill this requirement. Nonetheless, it's clear the only consensus about ISIS is that it must be destroyed. It's clear that Baghdadi sees himself as the political and religious echo of the first few caliphs. The name he has given himself, Abu Bakr, is the same as the first caliph after Muhammad, who famously said, "If I do well, help me, and if I do wrong, set me right," which Baghdadi quite ironically repeated, "If you see that I am wrong, advise me, and put me on the right track," saying those words as he ran one of the most violent and dissent-crushing organizations on the face of the earth.
Thanks, Will. By the way,
Man, he puts so much more effort into his motion graphics than me. No wonder he's got 141,000 subscribers, and I'm still like at like what? I'm still 100,000 behind him now. Shit.
if you aren't, subscribe to Political Junkie News. He's doing some really great work making today's politics make more sense. So to my friends out here in the West, I don't want you to think what ISIS is doing has anything to do with what Islam means. It's a huge religion with over 1,000 years of law, scholarship, and theology. So much so that ISIS really has little to do with what Islam is. Almost all the people fighting ISIS are Muslims themselves. And for God's sake, help those escaping refugees. They're trying to get away from all this. To counter the attention Daesh has been getting, post down in the comments something cool about Islam or the Islamic world. Psst, they invented algebra. And see what this massive religion is all about. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you in a fortnight.
Do you think Osama bin Laden purposely lied about Islam and knew he wasn't telling the truth? I mean, it'd be hard to tell. He was pretty religious. I think he took his stuff seriously. I would think that he had his own interpretation that was, you know, powerful because, you know, he was anti-Western imperialism in a time of a lot of Western imperialism. So, you know, there was that. Is there anything I do differently from that video? I feel pretty good about a lot of it. Updates. Well, I mean, it's still true. But ISIS has been largely defeated. They're not really an entity anymore. But that wasn't true in May of 2016. And I still think that we should be helping the refugees. I don't know. I don't really think my position of that video has changed significantly at all since then. If anything, it's gotten deeper. I've just like gotten more angry about it. All right. So next up, It's another video that has about 6,000 views. This is another video that I kind of... oh, geez. Let me just... This is another video that I think didn't get enough attention. Yeah, that ISIS video, if you look at the like to dislike ratio, it's pretty bad for me. But I think that it was important to say, and I feel really good about it. The next video is another video that I thought was really cool, but didn't get a lot of attention. So I thought maybe we should watch it, and then at least I can show 50 more people the video. So let's take a look. This is based on a podcast I listened to at one point, and then I really liked it. And then I actually got to talk to one of the scientists I talk about in the video, or the historians I talk about in the video.
Hey folks, in 1928, Scottish scientist Alexander Fleming was trying to grow Staphylococcus in his lab, a bacteria that's found on our bodies all over the place. In our nose, armpits, some other places I won't mention, really all over. However, if it gets into a cut, it can become deadly. He was not the
Destroying ISIS was the only good thing Trump ever did, except the fact that Trump didn't destroy ISIS. ISIS was destroyed by like a massive coalition of people, mostly taken out by like Syrian forces and like a mix of like all sorts of stuff. Like, yeah, like Trump had very little to do, if anything, with the defeat of ISIS.
cleanest scientist in the world, and went on vacation, leaving his petri dishes uncovered and a window open. When he came back to clean it up, one of the petri dishes looked a little weird. Little dead zones littered what should have been a healthy biofilm. At the center of these dead zones was a strange mold. The mold was making something that killed the bacteria, what we would call penicillin. Diseases that plagued us as long as we had existed could finally be beaten, a fundamental change in the human experience. As Alex's drug was paraded as the savior of mankind, even making the cover of Time, there began to be problems. Staff started to resist the penicillin before it even became public. With remarkable speed, this resistance covered the globe. It's a living testament to the power of natural selection. Since then, we have made countless antibiotics, and time again they become resistant. This has been made worse by overprescribing antibiotics and using antibiotics preemptively when growing animals on crowded farms. That arms race I mentioned begins to slow down as drug companies realize there's not much money to be made in researching drugs that become useless after maybe a decade. Now, we hear stories of superbugs that resist everything we have to throw at it. In walks in some unlikely heroes. Anglo-Saxon historian Christina Lee.
I actually got to have a nice Skype call with Christina Lee. I was going to do a stream with her at one point, but then we kind of lost touch. I should probably reach out to her again.
And microbiologist Freya Harrison. Freya Harrison studies how bacteria evolve during long infections, but has a side obsession with Viking reenactments and Viking history. At the University of Nottingham, Freya began to learn Old English. She reached out to a reading group and met Christina. Christina Lee has a side interest in infectious diseases. The two of them became friends and began to look through medieval medical remedies. They look at something called Bald's Leech Book, a remedy book over 1,100 years old. It's an old remedy book of potions and ointments to heal any number of ailments in the Middle Ages. This involves things like remedies for demonic possession. They eventually came across one remedy called, quote, the best medicine. It was for infections around the eye, which in the days of houses full of wood smoke were quite common. Today we call it a stye. What causes this infection? Our old friend Staphylococcus. They had to give it a try. The recipe? Garlic, an onion, cow bile, and wine, all mixed together in a brass or bronze pot, stored for 9 days, and strained through a cloth. Apply the liquid directly to the infected eye with a feather. It seems like a silly medieval recipe, but when applied to staph, it was a massacre. The remedy really worked. They then tried it on the really nasty bug, MRSA, an antibiotic-resistant staph that has been one of the big superbugs. The remedy destroyed the MRSA, 90% of them. I should mention, it hasn't been tested on humans, so don't do it at home. What this story really should make us do is rethink what we mean when we discuss technological progress. Something developed over 1,000 years ago could beat bacteria we're struggling with now. Maybe we should look at what seemed superstitious and silly and look at it with new eyes. Make sure that everything means what we think it means. We need to do what historians always attempt to do and see the past from the eyes of the people living in it and not dismiss things that seem strange or silly to us. We dismissed Native Americans that chewed tree bark for fever to find that the bark had a compound we now call aspirin. We also have begun to try using leeches and maggots again for medical treatment, so maybe it's worth considering. I'm not talking about deferring to things we know don't work, but at least give everything a try. Sometimes, when we take a medicine out of circulation, resistance starts to wane. This is why the remedy worked so well. Maybe, if we had an arsenal that we could circle in and out, we might have one up on the bacteria. Societies around the world had different recipes, and they might be worth investigating for real medical properties today. Should we spend the resources to mine the past for medical cures today? Do you think it's a worthwhile endeavor? Let me know down in the comments, and come back in 2 weeks for another Step Back.
Oh man, alright, so there's a few things we can talk about in that. So, that video never performed well. And I thought it was really cool. That was a really cool story. I guess I probably didn't tell it very well. But yeah. So yeah, Alcidaire is like, say, a pass on the leeches. Leeches, the thing about leeches, and this is why they're so useful, is that they're really good for reconstructive surgery. Like if you've gotten a skin graft or if you've had a limb like amputated and put back on. See, what they do is leeches, their saliva has this anticoagulant agent to it, and also they suck blood. And so what they'll do is, by making your blood a little bit less coagulant, I guess, and sort of sucking like on the region that you apply them on, it sort of encourages blood flow to the region, which helps when like you're like say you had a finger that was sewn back on, to try and encourage blood to flow back into the finger. And yeah, also maggots. Maggots are good because maggots are actually attracted to eating dead flesh, but they don't eat living flesh. And so very often, like there's a lot of cases in which maggots have been used to save, like the most common one I've seen it used for is with diabetics. If they've gotten a massive infection in their feet, that maggots have actually like helped people keep their limbs. Like they sometimes an infection that would have otherwise have needed to that would have required an amputation could just have maggots applied to it, and they would eat all of the dead flesh, and that would kind of clean the wound, and then they could just heal. Yeah, it's cool stuff. But like I thought this was cool, and it was like kind of like flying in the face of like technology and progress and all that kind of stuff. And like I am of the opinion that, you know, I think I made another video later when I talked about progress and how we really need to have another look at that. And this is an example. Like there's still, I think there's like a form of concrete that like the Romans made that we still don't know how they made it. Okay. This is another video that's done really well. I kind of hasn't done... I think it's kind of lost its luster because a few other people have made videos on the same subject since I made this one. But this is my video on Mansa Musa. So, yeah. There you go.
Who is the richest person on Earth? Bill Gates? Carlos Slim? They don't come close. Today I'm going to talk about the richest person who ever lived. He spent so much money that he could destabilize entire regional economies and had his own personal army. He built an entire city into a global center of learning and power. This is a story of Mansa Musa, the first emperor of Mali, and his famous journey. Adjusted for inflation, this West African emperor was worth about $400 billion. Mali was an amazing trade empire. It was rich in both salt and gold, both extremely valuable commodities. The Empire of Mali was at a key position in global trade, facilitating goods between the West African coast and the Mediterranean. In a time when North Africa and the Middle East were in the midst of a giant golden age, there was plenty of profit to be had.
Yes! I'm so glad I found that picture. It's so good. It's so good. I just realized I make so many references to Deep Space Nine in my YouTube videos. It's actually kind of sad.
What makes Mansa Musa famous, however, is how he spent that money. He was a devout Muslim, and one of the main pillars of Islam is something called Hajj. All Muslims who can afford to do so must go on a pilgrimage to Mecca, something that still occurs today. It is a huge source of revenue for Saudi Arabia, as if it needed more, and is apparently quite a thing to see. However, Musa lived in the 14th century, and getting from Mali to Mecca was quite a long journey. He would need to be well prepared, and prepared he was. Mansa Musa's voyage is legendary for its extravagance. This is mostly based on scattered oral records, but legends speak of a 60,000 strong entourage to carry gold and supplies. He also had 500 slave heralds with gold staves. Carrying a vast wealth of gold was a giant army of horses and camels. He was one for traveling in style. Anytime his caravan stopped in a town, he'd shower them with gold. He'd buy extravagant souvenirs, donate large sums to the poor. It was said that wherever he stopped on Fridays, the holy day of the week for Muslims, he would order the building of a mosque. He flooded so much gold into these towns, he created destabilizing inflation. This legend spread around the Mediterranean, even making it to the shores of Europe. At the time, it was a rather war...
Don't say... Oh, because of the sirens outside? Yeah, people didn't like this one either. People try to make the argument that, like, some, like, Roman asshole was richer, and I was like, not really.
...torn and economically weak region. So stories of far-off wealthy emperors really took hold. So much so that he would feature on European maps in West Africa. I always like to tell this story. It really hit me as seeing history sideways when West Africa, considered by many of us in the West as a very poor region, was the seat of one of the wealthiest empires in human history, and the literal richest person who ever lived. This is all while Europe was a bit of a mess. It always seemed interesting to hear of the balance of power in the world on the eve of colonization, when did it all start to go pear-shaped. Lastly, before I go, I want to mention something coming up in this feed. I am getting close to 1,000 subscribers at a shocking speed.
Close to
And
1,000
I think
subscribers.
The additional gift for 1,000 subscribers is a Q&A video. So, from now until I get to 1,000 subscribers, either comment on a video or fill out the Google form in the video description, and I will put it in the pool of questions to answer. Maybe it will be a Google Hangout. I'm not sure yet. These can be about history, or me, or what I do, or how the channel works. It's an AM almost A.
Why did I
And
use
will see
shitty
you in
Rage comic memes? I don't know. I did all sorts of stuff. So, like, you know, this is just... what's it called? I'm too old to be good at memes.
Google Hangout. I'm not sure yet. These can be about history, or me, or what I do, or how the channel works. It's an AM almost A.
Alrighty. That was also back before I, like, literally answered every single question ever. Like, in real time. Like I'm doing now with you guys. Alright. Next one's a special one. Make Kelly happy. This is not a video that did well, but it wasn't one that was intended to. Maybe I'll make this the last video of the night, because this is a special one. This is the one, yeah. It's good stuff.
Hey folks, I thought I'd put together a special step back today. If you were watching this on the day I released it, I'm actually getting married today. So as a gift to you guys to celebrate, I thought I'd make a little video about some strange wedding traditions I came across. One, blackening the bride. Leave it to the Scots to have a weird wedding tradition. Before getting married, the bride and groom get humiliated. They get attacked with a mix of things such as rotten eggs, fish, and really anything anyone can find that's disgusting. They claim that if you can survive this, you can survive marriage. 2. Chickens. Chickens never come out on top on weddings. They were either cooked on a plate, like I will be enjoying, or eviscerated in the name of love. There are a few odd chicken-related wedding traditions that come out of China. The Daur people in Inner Mongolia have a particular save the date by finalizing the day of the wedding with the killing of a baby chick with a knife that they hold together. They can't even do the ceremony until they cut open a chicken to find that it has a healthy liver first. I'm no anthropologist, but the Daur people seem to have a peculiar relationship with chickens. Then again, chicken McNuggets might have half a dozen different chickens' meat in each one, so are we really morally superior on that front? 3. Bridesmaids. This one also comes from China, but involves way less animal cruelty. One fun tradition in China is that the bridesmaids have to test the groom to see if he's worthy. This usually means demands for money and any number of humiliating rituals. Hazing the groom. Sounds like fun. 4. I pronounce you tree and wife. Astrology is still important to many people in India. So much so that some women born under the wrong sign are thought to be cursed, and marrying will result in the early death of their husbands. There is one workaround though. They have to get married first to a tree. They then destroy the tree and no more curse. 5. Bridal kidnapping. This is under a little bit of scrutiny lately, but in Kyrgyzstan, the old habits die hard. This habit going all the way back to the steppe hordes that used to grace the Kyrgyz countryside. A man did not meet his wife. He
Okay, kidnap. Oh, geez.
or kidnapped her. It was considered a good omen if the bride was crying. They banned this in 1991, but some families still go through the motions, with the bride kinda knowing that it's coming and more or less agreed to beforehand. 6. Spartan brides. In true Spartan fashion, kidnapping also played a role in their marriages. Women about to get married would shave their heads and put on men's clothing. Then they would await the kidnapping from their husbands-to-be. This is why we remember the Spartans for being such romantics. I think that's enough for now. If you know of a weird wedding ritual from today or from history, let me know about it down below. Also, don't forget that from now until I get 1,000 subscribers, I'm taking questions for my big Q&A video. Either comment with it or submit it to the Google form in the description. See you guys next week for another Step Back.
It's funny because I think on the day of my wedding, I actually got 1,000 subscribers. That was like the day I hit that number. So, good day overall, I would say. And so, yeah, that's like a funny thing. So there's some requests for me to show some wedding pictures. There's a problem with that. All the wedding pictures I have are on my Facebook page. And, oh, definitely the happiest day of my life, for sure. This was June of 2016. But, like, if I were to show these pictures, I'd have to go on my Facebook profile. And, like, I like you guys. I like all 42 of you. But, like, I really don't want, like, 8,000 friend requests on Facebook.
Just download one.
But, like, I'd have to go on... I guess I can just do it off screen, so...
You only have to show them one.
Yeah, all right. Let me just go and look around for one. I forgot that I can do stuff and you can't see it, so I'll just work on that. But yeah, that was the video that I released on my wedding day. In the meantime, let's just you guys can see me in my full glory. Let me see. Let me find a good one. Eee. Oh man. I actually did not wear a blue powder tuxedo. Let me just let's see. I know I've got one. I know I got like an album or something somewhere. Oh wait, I didn't upload it, did I? No. It's gonna be under
I did the album.
So it'll be under photos of me. Alright, what's a good one? Okay.
I'm disappointed that it's so hard for you to find these pictures.
It's not that hard. All right. Now let me just get a picture going. Oh man. It's more of an issue with my ability to navigate Facebook, because I'm like never on this site anymore. I'm sure this is just great entertainment right now.
It's true, you're hemorrhaging viewers.
No! Please stay, friends. See, it's like my vacation photos. This is stuff people want to see. It's all right. The true fans will know. All right. Let's try this one. Let me just make it a little bigger. There we go. There's a picture of the two of us on the day. So as you can see, I wore jeans and like Doc Martens and like a bow tie and stuff. So like we were so innocent back in 2016. Oh man. That was a good day. It was perfect. I actually like we didn't have any major wedding issues or anything. It was pretty great. Like, it was a nice day. It wasn't even too hot. It wasn't too cold. It was like, you know, sunny, and then it rained at nighttime, but like late enough that like nobody cared. And we had an open bar, and like nobody got super wasted, and like it was a perfect wedding. Everything was really good. And yeah, it's not so much about me being tall. It's about her being short, because Kelly's about like 5'2", and I'm like about 6 feet tall. So, you know, I don't look too happy. I think I was just making a face because there was a lot of pictures taken of me today. You're very tall, or Kelly's very short. It's kind of a mix. It's kind of both. But yeah. That's yeah. So there you go. You saw the wedding photo. Yeah. All right. So for the looks like about 15 people left while I was getting that picture. I'll take any. We have about 8 minutes left. So does anyone have any last questions? I think somebody asked about Rojava. I think my position with the Rojava at the moment is that with the Syrian civil war looking like it's going the way it is, that the best that they could hope for is to become like a semi-autonomous region in Syria. And even that would probably be a long shot, because I imagine the Turks wouldn't like that very much. You would get massive views by engaging Cody in a kickboxing match. That would, I don't know. That would not, I don't know. I couldn't do that. That would be weird. Just wanted to thank you for introducing me to anarchism. Awesome, Liz. You're on a good path. You should, if from me, like the bread book is a very good start. That's I'm reading the bread book right now, and it's pretty good. Yeah. I'm about 10 inches or like almost a foot taller than Kelly, I think. I said 5'2", but I actually think Kelly's like 5'0", and I'm like 6'0" or 6'1", one of those two. So it's like it's an awkward height difference. Like enough that it makes like dancing weird and stuff.
Yeah, dancing is weird.
She agreed with me. Any more questions before I wind down for the evening and give my throat a rest? Have you thought about doing the So That Happened podcast again with the others? About a month ago, I got in a pretty big fight with Cody, and I don't know if we're ever going to do the show again. So, you know, if you know, if things change, I mean, I would say yes to doing the show again, maybe, depending upon how he approached the fact that he did what he did. But whatever. What is the Bread Book? It is a book called The Conquest of Bread by Peter Kropotkin, and it is a very good book of political philosophy. Basically, in my opinion, better than Marx, better than the Communist Manifesto, better than Das Kapital. It lays out in plain language, understandable text, and really, in the best way possible, the outlook of what anarchism is and why we should be, why we should all be anarcho-communists. There actually is also there is a bakery in Paris, I want to say, called La Coquette du Pain, which is like the Conquest of Bread. But yeah, the Bread Book is, I think, I think that Kropotkin is a better political philosopher than even Karl Marx. And I know that that's like hardcore words to say, but I think that the first essay on like all belongs to all is pretty legit. And I would even say it's not for beginners, but actually it's at least the first few chapters have been pretty accessible. But like the idea that like nobody can really own anything because there's no self-made person. There's no like I am the person who built my own destiny. Like you are, like everybody else, a inheritor of the countless generations who toiled before you and exist in a circumstance of how the world works today. And really, nobody is 100%, or nobody is even has any real claim to ownership over anything. And so the whole big thing is like all belongs to all. Like, if nobody can own anything, then everybody owns everything. And if that's the case, then delineating who gets what is a very big thing. And then his second chapter is all about how the Jacobins and like the French revolutionaries were so up, they had their heads so far up their own ass about their liberal ideology that they forgot to be like a movement of the people and like make sure that people got food and had their material conditions taken care of, and that the point of a social movement should be about making everyday life better for everybody and not just like these high-minded ideals, which I think is also like, very big on like the anarchist idea of like praxis and how you can have the best ideas in the world and the best laid plans, but if it's not resulting in people getting like goddamn food and lodging, then like your plan sucks. That kind of stuff. Do we have any last questions before I wrap up? We only have about a minute. All right. Yeah, so this is the end of my very long stream. I hope that you guys have a great week. I might not be able to do a stream on Thursday. Depends upon how my work schedule works out. We'll see. But I'll post it if it happens. Anyways, I hope you guys have a great night. And keep watching Step Back. We'll come back to the watching series in a few weeks. I think next week I'm going to fire up a Paradox game. I think that'll be fun. I think everybody will enjoy that. I don't know which one I'm going to do yet, but we'll figure it out. Anyways, have a good night, friends.